evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Livonia Public School Board of May 26, 2015. This is a committee of the whole meeting. The type of things that happen at this meeting, typically the items that we will have on our agenda for discussion tonight have been brought up in a study session or in a previous committee of the whole meeting, and they're here for more discussion tonight. Votes are not taken at committee of the whole meeting, so that there will not be a vote tonight. But rather, ideas are flushed out. If there are more questions and answers to be directed to the superintendent, that kind of action will be requested, and so forth. But you'll hear a lot of discussion tonight, but you will hear no votes taken tonight. The first item on our agenda is audience communications. I do have 3 blue slips, and the first is from Kristen Knoll. Audience communication is a type, feel free to come up to the table, Kristen. Audience communication is a portion of our meeting when the board has set aside time to listen to the citizens in the community. We do ask that everybody honor the board policy of a 3-minute limit per person, and that is so that we're fair to everyone and everyone has an opportunity to speak before the board. Kristen, you are the first one up.
Can I just say?
I prefer that you come sit down just because otherwise you won't be mic'd and your comments may not be recorded. It's kind of part of the whole process. Sorry about that. Okay. You're not mic'd inside this room, but that way your comments are recorded. We can't hear you if you're in the audience, so on the recording later.
All right. So I'm the president of the PTA at Perrineville, for those that don't know. My name is Kristen Knoll. Livonia Public Schools stands as a lighthouse district, a beacon of excellence offering exceptional educational opportunities to all children and serving as a source of pride for our community. As a premier school system, we promote a passion for learning and a philosophy that puts the needs of children and their education first. This is Livonia Public Schools' mission statement. This is what has brought families to Livonia and kept them here. No matter where you live in the Metro Detroit area, Livonia has always been a top contender for having great schools. Our excellence and accolades have kept our strong ship sailing to greatness and held in high regard. But now we could potentially have a tiny leak. Just like when a big ship gets a tiny leak, those on the upper deck don't pay attention or know it's even there. Just like with the closing of Perrineville, those who aren't directly affected or don't have special needs children may not think this is a big deal. But eventually this tiny leak is going to get bigger. And eventually this strong ship that we have worked on for so long is going to start to sink. We've already held a meeting to discuss why it's a bad decision to close Perrineville as it relates to the children and their development. Another factor to consider is how it will look to our community and the communities surrounding us. Just look to our border cities. Plymouth Canton, another community where schools are looked at in high regard, didn't have what we have within Perrineville. We were one step ahead of them when it came to developing special needs children. Now they're making their own Perrineville because they believe the importance and need for early intervention. Why would we take a step backwards when we were already one step ahead? This is our last attempt to try and change your mind on this proposal. If you close Perrineville, the children who you are affecting will never know the opportunities that you're taking away from them. If you keep Perrineville open, in 5 years, those same children may thank you for it. The moral and right thing to do is to leave the school open. Let's work together as a community, find an alternative solution to closing Perrineville. At the end of the day, we don't want to be known as the school district that closed a school for special needs kids. And I brought a little video of my son, who has autism. When he started Perrineville 2 years ago, he could not talk. And this is him today.
Please save him, Perrineville. They help save me. Now I can talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very nice.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next blue slip that I have is from Lauren Peters.
Hi, my name is Lauren Peters. My son Chase went to Perrineville for 2 years and is now in the Buchanan Center program. In the past week, I've realized something in addition to what I was already noticing through this whole thing. Dr. Lipa is either a man determined to find a new job or a man determined to get another raise. I'm in the business world every day, and that's the only reason why someone would be out there interviewing like this. He'll have left, and you'll be left to handle the fallout from this decision. All of us parents who've been fighting you for weeks will be the same parents representing our child's interests in IEP meetings. We're all extremely knowledgeable on parents' rights and what our children are entitled to. The proposed splitting of the programs and repositioning into general education schools will undoubtedly lead to a more restrictive environment and loss of dignity for the kids. We'll be bringing in advocates, doctors, private therapists, etc. to weigh in and make sure our rights are protected and our kids' needs are met. Webster was a huge smear for Livonia a few years ago. The school board could claim ignorance on that and act on it once publicized. The abuse seen there was major, and I believe recovery was possible because there were no other recent issues. In this circumstance, you're moving the neediest of the needy into situations where the liability is great. The admin and other staff in those buildings, they're not trained to handle situations that result from even our most typical special needs kids, let alone the most unique of cases. Patience is a virtue, and in the case of those working with these kids, the most ultimate extreme virtue. Our kids push everyone to the extreme, staff, parents, and other kids. Plus, they're Houdinis beyond all others. I see bad things happening, and it will be difficult for Livonia to recover from another scandal involving special needs kids. At the end of the day, my nonverbal 3-year-old here went into Perrinville completely consumed by his sensory needs. He was throwing chairs, slapping people in the face on a daily basis. Rooms would have to be cleared out to make sure the other children were safe. Reports were filed numerous times. He's now at Buchanan in kindergarten, a completely functional little man who can tell me that he loves me and ask me for help when he needs it. I'm begging you not to split the programs up. This is a benchmark program. Everybody we deal with in the special needs community knows about it. Everybody wants to be in Livonia to send their kid to this program. Benchmark companies do not decide that they're going to be like everybody else, just give up and do what everyone else is doing. I'm begging you to keep the programs together. Thank you.
Thank you. The next blue slip that I have is from Rochelle Ranta.
Hello, I'm Rochelle Ranta. I'm a 27-year resident of Livonia. I'm a teacher at Perrinville. And I just have 2 questions. Is the information we were told was going to be compiled at the forum and distributed. We still haven't received anything yet. And the other one was, at my forum group, it was never talked about busing. Right now, I have 2 of my ASD students that get put on Livonia buses, as well as the ECP students get put on the same bus and the GSRP. So we have 1 bus coming. It's gathering from 3 different programs. If all these programs are split up and you have 4 different schools, you're going to be sending 4 buses instead of 1. So that's going to create a lot of problems, I think, with your busing. So there's my 2 statements.
Thank you. And as you can, Dr. Lee,
I can quickly answer those 2 just so we don't have to send a written response. The
That's
first
fine.
one, the Q&A is actually done. In fact, the board has had a chance to see it in draft form, and we hope to have that out this week, possibly as early as tomorrow. So that will be, that is done and will be completed. I want to thank the staff who worked really hard to go through the many pages of comments that we received on that night. So that will be coming out this week. And then on the busing, we have taken into consideration what the additional busing would be if we were to move the programs. And so it's all part and parcel of our planning.
Dr. Lepa, the Q&A, will that be coming through the building principal?
Yes,
To the
yes, we'll
staff
send that
and
to the,
parents?
yes, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And we'll put one on the website.
Alrighty, so building principal to parents, staff, and on the website. Okay, thank you. And thank you to those who have shown up to listen to this topic being discussed tonight, and who have come forward to share their thoughts and concerns. Unfortunately, this is not the first time that the district has gone through it. It's not the first time that I've gone through it, because my kids' building was closed also. Went through a lot of things, but I do thank you for showing up and gathering information so that you're informed citizens, informed parents. I appreciate it. The next item on our agenda is building and site, and we will hear from Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Burton. We have 3 items under building and site tonight. We're going to talk about the quarterly report, and I believe we have Mr. Terrio and Mr. Van Kirk here from CRESA. We also are going to have a discussion on the change orders for the architect services that were necessary as a result of the increase in the scope of work at Franklin. And then Ms. Abbey is going to review the bids for the Franklin siding. So I will turn it over to Ms. Abbey.
Thank you very much. I can see behind me that Mr. Terrio is walking up. As you know, since we began working on the bond and since the bond was approved in May of 2013, we have brought forward to the Board of Education each quarter a report, which Paul will go over again in detail, but showing you what's been going on overall, kind of a snapshot look at what's been going on with the budget, both from a budget standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint, from the point of view of where are we on our projects, what's critically happening, what's going on, what's the board going to be looking for shortly, and then what's coming down in the long term. So with that, I'm hoping that Paul's ready to come talk about his dashboard.
You want to come up, Greg? We'll get it here. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Abbey. So we are back again. 3 months went by quick. 2 years has went by quick, actually. So you guys have seen this format before. Really, this is just kind of a snapshot of where we are, a picture in time. The goals and objectives in the upper left-hand corner are pretty constant, just talking about the overall bond project and what some of the goals were. Bottom left, we've got critical project issues. So right now, one of the big things on our plate is Wayne County engineering approval at Franklin. We actually had a pretty good meeting down there last week where we talked about some of the new traffic improvements that we're looking to make with realigning the drive, putting in a new traffic signal. We spent a lot of time talking about deceleration lanes and how that would impact the different bus traffic from the parents, from the drop-off, from the student traffic. I think we made some good progress. We're not there yet, but we're getting close. The good news is that's not holding up our building permit with getting started this summer, so that's still full speed ahead. Other than that, we're really just looking at material and equipment submittals and approvals, so making sure we have windows when we need them, mechanical units, be it floor tile, light fixtures, pretty much all the things that we need to get the construction done this summer. The good news is we do have a lot of that in town already, so unit ventilators are out on site at some of the buildings already. Light fixtures have all been ordered, mechanical rooftop units, things like that are all ordered and scheduled to be delivered here shortly, so no hiccups like the casework issue we had last year. We do have one issue that's similar to the casework issue we've been trying to keep our thumb on is metal lockers. There's really only 3 companies that do metal lockers, and one of them basically went out of business on us this year, so we've transferred those contracts to one of the other 2 firms, and we're keeping a close eye on that to make sure that we don't have any problems with those deliveries. So it does not appear that we will, but we are keeping close tabs on it. Move management, we've been spending a lot of time trying to make sure that everybody knows that the movers are coming last day of school and making sure we have everything boxed up and packed and ready to go. We're using the media centers and the gymnasiums at the buildings for a lot of the storage, and then we'll be out in trailers in the parking lots as well. And then really just getting ready for construction. And I say getting ready for the big push, but we've really already started at some of the buildings. Roosevelt and Riley have both had areas of the building abated over spring break, and the construction has started already. So those are moving along well. The other buildings have second shift work going on, electricians, IT, cabling, and things like that, that has started as well, so. And then, as always, we're already starting on next year's projects, so we've got a lot of design work happening. We're in schematic design right now on the 3 elementaries, the upper elementary, middle school, and high school projects for next year. We're hoping to bid those out even earlier this time, so we'll probably bid out the elementary schools in early December. Holmes and Johnson will go probably mid-December, and then Stevenson would go as soon as we get back from winter break. So I think we timed the market pretty good last time, but I think we can do a little bit better job if we get on the street just a little bit sooner. So as you probably know, the construction market has been pretty hot lately, so prices are going up, so we really want to make sure that we time it perfect. So. And then, as always, the biggest thing this time of year is making sure we have certificates of occupancy when school starts up in the fall. So that's what all this is about. So we're keeping our eye on that goal and that date. So budget summary. So we have in the top middle, this is just a snapshot on May 22nd, kind of what everything looked like. So we've got our original budget, well, its current budget of $195 million is the better way to look at it. We've committed to date about $82 million worth of contracts. That includes all the construction, the IT contracts that have been let, professional services. Actuals paid was about $31.5 million, which leaves about $50 million left, cost to complete. So contracts that are let that have not been paid yet. So that's a pretty good percentage of the way through, if you think about it, 81 out of 195. And if you look down below, we still have only sold the first series of bonds, which were about $108 million. So if you think we've spent about 81 of that $108 million, which is, again, a pretty good percentage. Then down below, we basically have a reconciliation that we did. We've been doing these once a month and then reporting back quarterly, but you can see as of March 31st, so that date's a little bit off from the May 22nd date, but as of March 31st, 2015, when the quarter ended, we had spent just under $30 million. And that's what eBuilder shows, and then versus what the district's books show, which we match again to the penny, which is always good.
This is a good thing.
It is a good thing. 3-month look-ahead schedule. So we talked about a lot of this, but really we have a lot of construction work on second shift ongoing, some IT work on second shift. We have our presentation tonight. We have the last day of school for students is coming up on June 11th, and the last day for teachers, June 12th. The movers will be getting started that week. They'll be working in the media centers. They'll be working in some of the back-of-house type spaces and getting things moved out over the weekend, and then abatement and construction, or abatement and demolition start on Monday the 15th. We don't have dates quite nailed down yet for when we'd be back to the board for design development presentations in the fall. Some of those projects will probably hit the DD mark over the summer, but we'll probably come back, I would say, in September and just present all of those at the same time just to make it a little more palatable. And then obviously we've got inspections and approvals, which gets back to that C of O. And then the move-in. So we've taken a lot of extra time this year to work with staff to make sure their expectations are aligning with what our schedule looks like. Making sure that they know when they come back, everything's not going to be perfect, but it will be habitable. We'll have extra movers there on site to help them unpack and help them rearrange their rooms a little bit. And then that first day for teachers is the 2nd, and first day of school is the 8th. So I think I've said before that this year we actually have an extra week this summer, so that should help. We also have an extra building, which is an extra $10 million or so in construction to do, but that extra week will help us get a little bit more complete than we were last year. So. And then the phasing schedule, you've seen that before, but we do have the 2016 buildings on there, Grant, Hoover, Randolph, Johnson, Holmes, and Stevenson. And then the 2017 buildings are still to be determined. So, all in all, I think everything's progressing very well. You know, everybody's got the drill down from the first year, a lot of good lessons learned, and a lot of good progress made to date so far this year. So.
Any
questions at all?
It doesn't matter. Go ahead, Mr. Sutter.
Well, I just, actually, Ms. Abbey or Dr. Leopa, We're talking about spending a tremendous amount of money redoing these buildings. There's probably people who are not fully aware of how the school funding, how we're funded. Could you explain why we can't use the bond money to do general operations and keep a school open that we may consider closing?
Yes, ever since actually 1994, school districts are rather limited in regards to what money they can raise for operating purposes. That was the point in time where the state of Michigan took over funding for all local public schools, and they really are in control in regards to how much money per student every school district gets. And so that is told to us each year by the legislature, and with the exception of being able to do a county-wide millage, there are no ways for local school districts to go and actually raise operating funds. One of the things we can do, though, is raise money for our facilities. And so with the good graces of our community, we've been lucky to both have a sinking fund to do ongoing repairs in our schools, and also a bond issue, which, as you know, is doing a complete facelift across our school district to all of our facilities. And so those funds can only be used for facilities, and that's the only local control now that school districts have over their spending, or actually the money that they raise, I should say.
And when you say facilities, you don't mean keeping the lights on, keeping the heat going, it's just
Correct.
Capital improvements and
Exactly. It's major renovations and/or rebuilding.
Thank you.
This is my turn. Paul, I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
The locker company that closed, the other two companies, they bid on this project also?
Yeah, we get different bids on, we had 3 different bid packages really for the construction, so I think we had 2 bids on most of the projects, and I think we might have had 3 bids on one of them. So in some of the instances, the lockers are a subcontract to the carpenters. In some cases, we have a direct contract with them. So we've lucked out where we have a direct contract with the supplier. It has not been the one that went bankrupt or went out of business. Where they were a subcontractor to the carpenter, we've actually asked the carpenter to switch suppliers in essence, and they've done that on their own accord. So there's no contracts to be rewritten or increased cost to the district at all.
Okay, so it's the same supplier, it's just the contractor that bid on the actual work itself for installation that went out of business?
No, it's actually the manufacturer of the lockers
manufacturer
themselves. So in that case, the carpentry contractor, it's
Has to go
then
find someone
up to
else.
them. He's got to go find someone else to supply the materials for him to install.
Okay, but the prices haven't changed?
Nope.
Because
Has not cost the district any
we contract with the
money.
contractor, not the supplier.
Okay,
Yep.
no, that's fine,
Yep.
I just didn't understand, so.
Yep.
And secondly, on the selection of the schools, enrollment trends, how is that looked at in this process?
That's a Dr. Lampa question.
Yes, actually, prior to the bond issue, and we talked about this on multiple occasions, prior to the bond issue, we did a very thorough summary in regards to our long-term projections for enrollments. And so when we did the bond issue and went to the community, because it was a community question actually that came up on more than one occasion, that we would take into consideration what our enrollment trends were. And so we did long-term enrollment trends prior to the bond issue and made it clear that the facilities that we were going to put money in, we felt had a long-term useful life in our school district based on those enrollment trends.
So really, we're taking direction from the district.
Pardon?
We're taking direction from the district on which buildings to do in what order, so.
Okay, because I know a couple of our schools have gotten pretty low.
As we projected.
Okay. All right, that's it.
Thank you, President Bird. Paul, looking at this, I understand it's getting rather competitive out there for construction and things, and I understand timing's everything. And what are the unit controllers?
Unit ventilators?
The unit ventilators.
Yep.
I understand that the cost of those have shot right through the roof. Is that right?
Yeah, we're seeing that with a lot of different equipment. The lockers are a good example. If there's 3 companies that supply lockers and one of them goes out of business, now the competition, just got a little bit different out there, so prices go up. We're seeing that whether it's mechanical bids, whether it's mechanical units, light fixtures, electrical bids. So the work that we did to pre-purchase some of those systems, the fire alarm system, the temperature controls, the vertical unit ventilators, is really paying off dividends, huge dividends. We really locked in those prices. And when we locked them in, we allowed them to escalate those prices up, but they really didn't escalate them up more than 1% or 2%, whereas now we're seeing it, double digits easy. So by taking that time up front to do that, we're really saving a lot of money on the back end, for sure.
Yeah, and I understand the unit ventilators have doubled.
In some instances, it depends on the quantity. When we were able to do that, we were looking at 900 or 800 unit ventilators across the district. When you have that kind of buying power, you can really drive the cost down. So, yeah, if you were looking to go out and buy just for one school, buy 20 or 30 of them, you could be looking at somewhere upwards of double the cost.
Any idea how much we save by going out and purchasing into the future?
It'd be hard to say, just because you don't know exactly what the market's going to do over the next 3 years, but that would be an interesting study to do at the end of the bond, to go back and look and see what prices were over the last 5 years and how much money we had really saved. But I'd venture to guess it'd be in the millions of dollars.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want to run the rest of the building portion?
Oh, okay. Just wake me up.
Okay.
All right, that takes us then, if there are no other questions, to item 2B, discussion of change order for architect services 2013 bond. Ms. Abby.
Thank you very much. You have in front of you a packet brought around by Mr. Terrio. These are out of order. We'll do item B first, the Stantec change order. Their backup is about 5 pages into it. It's almost a big chunk of the document. I'm going to let Paul go through the details, but generally what we're looking at tonight, you'll recall Stantec is the architect formerly known as SHW for our upper elementaries, middle schools, and high schools. And you'll recall that when we brought the bid to you for Franklin High School, we indicated that we adjusted the scope of work for Franklin High School. We added some of the, as Paul mentioned earlier, we talked about some of the site improvements on the exterior of the building, some of the mechanical improvements that we've added to the original scope of work, as well as some of the auditorium scope of work. So as a result of that and some other things that Paul will talk about, Stantec is appropriately requesting a change in their overall contract based on the fact that their contract was put together with a certain dollar amount of expectation of work, and we've increased that dollar amount, so it's appropriate for us to take a look at this and talk about this and ask for approval as a change order as we would any other scope of work. So with that, I'll let Paul get into the detail.
Thanks, Lisa. So these change orders presented by Stantec are not new. We've been negotiating these for a while. But we wanted to bring them to the board all at once, just to be transparent and make sure you knew exactly what was going on. So there's actually 7 different issues that we've been kind of negotiating with them. The biggest one is Franklin High School. So as Lisa mentioned, the original budget for that project was about $15.3 million. And as you know, we've a couple times added money to that budget. Right now, we're at about, after tonight, we'll be at about $20.6 million, so about a $5.3 million increase. So accordingly, Stantec is asking for some additional design fees. If you think about the big things that we added, one of the biggest ones was all the site work. So all the traffic flow issues we talked about that we met with the county on last week, redoing the parking lot, main entranceway with the new arch that we're putting in at all the buildings. And then the second biggest one is really the mechanical system. So originally, that building, we were going to leave the dual duct system and just replace the dual duct system down in the tunnels. Instead, we decided to go to a new vertical unit ventilator system with a hot water loop rather than a steam loop throughout the building. That was a pretty big change. Those 2 things alone were probably around $2.5 or $3 million in additional design work that had to be done. And if you think about some of the other scope increases that we've had along the way, whether it's trying to address some flooring that wasn't in the original scope, or windows, or other adjacent spaces, redoing the old existing auditorium and reconverting that to usable space. The scope has grown quite a bit, and so did the design effort. So we've been negotiating for quite some time about what's the right amount that should be. I can tell you that what we're presenting tonight is a lot less than what it was originally, thanks to some help from Lisa. So we feel pretty comfortable about it. If we think about the budget going up about $5.3 million at Franklin, they're asking for additional design fees on about half of that. So I think that's pretty reasonable considering where we're at, so. So Franklin is a big piece. There's also some additional costs in here for that pre-purchasing program that we talked about. So Stantec helped us with their buildings, so the middle schools and high schools, but they also helped on the elementary side, which was really outside of their scope. So we've been talking about that for a while, about what would be a fair amount of money to help us do that. We also had the opportunity, about a month or so ago, we had DTE come out to Franklin to look at putting in a new electrical service for the auditorium addition. And we were able, because there's an extra switch out there, an extra cabinet in the high voltage lineup, we're actually able to reconfigure the way that electrical service is gonna come into the building and probably save, I don't have the exact numbers yet, but $30,000 or $40,000 in electrical costs with the way that the new feeders will route into the building. So that was something that, while we have to spend some money to redesign it, we're able to save multiples of that in the actual construction cost. So that was what number 3 was. And then at the other 4 buildings, Emerson, Riley, Cooper, and Frost, it's really going back through and doing some scope that was outside of the original RFP that we had put out. So some interior signage, some of the studies of the entryway element and how that would tie into the existing buildings, and then redoing some of the coordination between the IT and the electrical. So if you think about Riley, we had some unique ceiling details there that we had to redo, some electrical coordination, some things of that nature. So while this is a pretty big number, it's also kind of the aggregate of the first 2 years of the project, so it probably seems like, you know, more than it is if you look at the big picture of things. Stantec's original contract was just under $4 million, so if you think about $200,000 is, you know, it's not a huge percentage of that number. The other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, we have had some other smaller changes for French, so I don't want you to think that Stantec's the only one coming back and asking for changes. In fact, we've encouraged the architects that if we are asking for additional scope and you're doing additional work, we want to be fair with them. So if there's extra work involved, you know, bring it to our attention and we'll pay you for the work that you've done. So the way the RFPs and contracts were set up is pretty crystal clear what the expectations were, and we want to be fair with them if they're doing extra services. So just like we would with any of the other vendors. So.
Any questions, guys? President Burton.
Yes, for Emerson, Riley, Cooper, and Frost, interior signage, can you tell me exactly what that means?
Yeah, so we actually went through and basically renumbered and relabeled all the rooms in the buildings. What we found was over the course of the last 30 or 40 years, there were multiple signs on every door. So, you know, not to take a toilet room because that probably didn't change, but a classroom may have had room 100, and then right next to it on the wall, on the door, might have said room 100, on the wall might have said room 201, and then it probably had another plaque for the teacher's name. And what we decided was to go through, because we need to know what rooms are which for the new fire alarm systems because they're addressable. So if a smoke detector goes off, it'll tell you exactly where it's at in the building, but if there's 4 different signs on the room, it's kind of hard for the fire department to know where to go. So same thing for the new security systems. They have the ability to tell you, you know, where in the building you're at. The new temperature control systems needed a room number to associate with those. So what we found was we really didn't have that consistency across the different buildings, so we decided to go through and remove all the old signs and then put up one new sign and try to come up with a consistent method for how we labeled those. So, you know, if it's classroom 100, then the room adjacent to it, the storage room adjacent to it is 100A or something of that nature. So I think it was something that was outside of the scope, but it was something that made sense to do while we were out there. So that's what we had asked them to do for us.
Sounds like it's the interior version of when we relabeled all of our exterior
Yeah.
doors so that
Yeah.
we have the
Exactly.
safety of if we have an emergency of any sort and we're directing folks, we can say go to door 27 and
Yep.
they know for sure what door 27 is and can address the problem.
Yep, that's a perfect example.
Okay. The $30,000 to $40,000 in potential savings in electric costs for Franklin, item number 3 per DTE recommendations.
Yep.
I assume we're talking about $30,000 to $40,000 in costs to revamp the electrical system as opposed to operating, long-term operating dollars.
Correct, yeah, it's a one-time savings
Okay.
in the infrastructure that we'll be putting in.
Okay, so
So-
this will be savings to the sinking, or to the bond money?
Correct.
As opposed to general fund?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Centers?
Oh, it sounds like there's a number of entryway changes, but looking at the cost, they look pretty minor. Do you know what we did?
Yeah, it was really a couple things. One was, we asked both architectural firms to take a look at how we could rebrand the district on a building-by-building basis, and they both spent a lot of time coming up with different ideas, different renderings and mock-ups of how that signage could work. We eventually engaged French to do that work, and we paid them to do that work because it was above and beyond their scope. Stantec, while they did a bunch of the pre-design work, and they were kind of stuck with French's design and having to implement it at all the different buildings, we really didn't pay them for those efforts. So that was something that they had brought up, and we negotiated it down from what they had originally asked for to where we're at today. So I think it's definitely hours that they spent, and that's kind of how we're trying to look at things. If we ask them to do something additional and it takes them hours, we have predetermined hourly rates, so that's a pretty fair way to look at it, as opposed to some, nebulous percentage or something like that, so.
And those of us who went to those meetings will remember how many times we sent them back and
Yeah.
asked them to redo their designs, so.
Yeah.
We like what we came up with.
Ultimate.
So there was a lot of effort.
That's a lot of effort.
Anything else? President Burton?
Would this amount fall in contingency? And second part of the question is, are we still within budget?
I knew somebody would ask that question. So yes, we do have money. If you remember, a few months ago, Ms. Abby and I went through and kind of realigned the overall bond budget. We moved some additional money into asbestos to deal with some of the environmental issues. We moved some money into professional fees because we knew there were some issues like this. So right now, this won't come out of contingency. It'll actually come out of the professional fees budget, which has around $1.1 million or $1.2 million in it right now that's unallocated. So we're well within that budget.
Okay. So the contingency remains untouched?
Correct.
For this,
For
as far
this
as
issue.
this issue and that project?
That's correct.
Or those projects?
So we knew this was coming, so we already moved some money aside to deal with it a few months ago.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do we need to put this on for?
Yes,
Mhm.
please.
And it's gonna be on
As a
regular?
agenda?
Agenda?
So we can
Is
have
that
it
June
formally
8th?
approved.
June 8th.
Yes. Okay, very good. All right, that moves us on to item 2C, review of bids for Franklin siding. Ms. Abby?
Thank you. You might remember when we brought the large packet of bids for Franklin High School renovations and the new auditorium. You might first of all remember the really lovely good time we had when we brought in the renderings and we got to see of how the auditorium was going to look. If you can kind of mentally picture that, one of the things that you saw was that red siding that's on the front of the auditorium, as well as it's part of the interior design in the auditorium. And when we brought that bid to you, we told you that another company had provided an alternate bid that was a little less money, but we didn't know if it would meet our specifications. And we wanted to get a sample of the product and get a team together and look at it together and make a decision. I'm sorry.
Excuse me for a second, Ms. Abby. We're back into our regular packet right now, not the packet.
No,
you
it's
just
still
passed out.
here. It's still,
It's
it's
actually
the very,
page 2.
very
Okay.
front of
Sorry.
the
Several of us were
packet.
flipping around.
Yeah, my
looking for where we
packet's a
were.
little bit out of order, sorry.
Okay.
Franklin construction bid, I apologize.
Got it.
Item A on Paul Terrio's
Okay.
handout.
Excuse me, go ahead.
So back up.
Thank you.
Item A on Paul Terrio's handout. Move forward to where we were. So we did get that material in. We had a lot of people up in B, a lot of design experts, and then there was Steve and myself and Mr. Willenberg and some other people up there. And it really was a consensus and that to stay with the material that we had originally spec'd out. We thought for both longevity and for aesthetics, and Paul can add some other words if he wants, but we really did, it was really remarkably different in the way that it looked and would have made a significant difference, we thought, in the overall outcome on how the auditorium would look. So with that, we are recommending that we go with the original specifications for that, and I'll let Paul talk about the numbers in the detail.
Sure. So if you remember when we presented Franklin back in March, there were actually 2 categories that we did not include. One was this metal siding. which for all the reasons that Lisa just mentioned. The other one was the lifts in the auditoriums. There's a new lift that goes down to the orchestra pit. That we're still rebidding out. We only had one bid. We wanted to make sure we had at least two. So that'll be the last thing that we'll bring back to you, probably hopefully at the next meeting in June or possibly July. But for this bid, we did have one firm that met the base bid specifications, and we had an alternate, as Lisa mentioned. So the total dollars for this piece, I believe, is right around $159,000 that we're presenting. Page A2 really shows the revised overall Franklin budget numbers. So we were at about 20.45 million. Now we're at about 20.6 million. The lifts are a pretty small number, only about, I think, $15,000 or $20,000, I believe is what the lift amount was. So that won't change the overall budget much. But we are looking to add this $159,000 to the award. And this is for custom architectural and sheet metal specialists. They're actually just down the street here in Detroit. So this is kind of their specialty. So we got a good firm, we have a good product, and the architects were pretty adamant that it's a very big design element of the overall auditorium design. So we'll probably expect, a similar design at Stevenson when we get to that one next year. So.
Any questions? None. All right. Do we have to do anything on this, or? This is just, so we need to put this on for regular agenda as well.
Please.
All right, very good.
And with that, you can take the Paul Terrio 3-hole punch document and turn it over for the rest of this evening. The rest of it is duplicated elsewhere in your packet, so, unless you have a question, in which case I'll turn it back over.
I
And you can put it in your
We're not
binder,
gonna talk about the document cam?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that later. So
Okay.
that's why I said you can turn it over. The other information will be
Okay.
in your packet and will be
Okay.
brought up under finance later. The balance of the information will be back up to you in the finance section of the meeting.
All right. And President Burton, that concludes Building and Site.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 3, curriculum, and turn it over to Mrs. Laura.
Thank you, President Burton. We have two items on our agenda today for the Curriculum Committee. The first item is the review of the resolution to participate in MHSAA, which is the Michigan High School Athletic Association. And Mr. Archibald, give you a minute to get up here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
See everyone. As Mrs. Laura said, I'm here this evening to talk with you about renewing our membership in the Michigan High School Athletic Association for the 3 middle schools and the 3 high schools for the 2015-16 school year. To obtain membership in the MHSAA, the board must approve a membership resolution on an annual basis. In short, the resolution states that the district will supervise related activities and accept the Constitution and bylaws of the MHSAA as the minimum standard, which is their rules and regulations, by which the district will operate our interscholastic athletic program. Membership in the MHSAA is a condition for participation in any of the MHSAA postseason tournaments. And again, that's the high school level only. A couple new things that are going on in the MHSAA for next school year, and you'll remember, I think 2 years ago, we instituted the concussion protocol, and the MHSAA was instrumental in that across the state. This past fall, all high school, prior to this year, only varsity head coaches had to participate in rules meetings and risk management meetings. And the MHSAA made it mandatory for all coaches, with the exception of volunteers. They're also required to participate then in the rules meeting and the risk management meetings on an annual basis. So that took effect this past fall. Next fall, the MHSAA is requiring all varsity head coaches to be CPR certified. As our athletic council reviewed this, we felt that all of our coaches, regardless of their level, paid and volunteer, should be both CPR and AED trained. And so we've taken it that much further. The athletic directors are currently in the process of making sure that all of our coaches at the high school level are in fact trained and will be before their season starts. MedSport, who is one of our trainers, or the provider of our current trainers, is working with us as well to provide a source for that training. So that's what's new for this next year, and I'll be certainly glad to take any questions. Otherwise, I'd ask that this be on consent agenda at our next meeting.
Any questions or comments? No? Okay. This is a annual thing that we've reviewed and probably done for many, many years.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so this will be on the consent agenda? Does the board agree with that? Okay, for the June 8th meeting. Thank you, Mr. Ashby.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is to review the bids, a recommendation for the adoption of an AP government textbook. Hi, Mrs. Ellis.
Good evening, Mrs. Laura. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we are very pleased to bring to the Board of Education a recommendation to purchase a new textbook for our AP government class. This book will be used at all 3 of our high schools. As is the practice in our district when we are adopting a new textbook, a committee is formed with teacher representation from each of our high schools and also facilitated by one of our district's curriculum facilitators. And for this adoption, we have Dr. Joan Livingston, our secondary ELA and social studies facilitator, who chaired the committee. The committee engaged in the textbook adoption process that is outlined in our administrative regulations or board policy. That textbook adoption includes 3 major phases. The first phase is to analyze and evaluate sample textbooks. And for that process, the committee begins by pulling the AP government curriculum from the College Board and reviewing that curriculum. They also review the current literature on research-based best practices and the research on quality textbook criteria. The committee then establishes the quality textbook criteria that they will use to evaluate all of the textbooks. And an example of that criteria for this textbook adoption included the ability to integrate technology into the content, provides access to news resources in order for there to be current examples that students are using, and also includes real-world supplemental online resources. Then the committee analyzes the textbooks to, 1, ensure that they are aligned to the AP government standards. They apply the quality criteria to the textbooks, and then they analyze their findings. The textbook committee evaluated 9 different textbooks, and by applying this criteria, they were able to narrow it to 2 textbooks. Then the committee moved to the second phase of the textbook adoption, and that is to gather input from students. In this phase, the committee identified a series of questions that they were going to ask their students based on their interactions with the 2 textbooks. Each committee selected a class that they were going to ask to evaluate the textbooks. The students read a portion of the textbook, and then the teacher asked the students questions, and they followed the same process with the other textbook. The teachers then collected the information from the students, and they evaluated their perception about which textbook was readable and understandable, and also about the use of visuals such as maps and charts and graphs to support their learning. And then the third and final phase of the textbook adoption process is to evaluate the ancillary or the teaching support material that's available. Based on all 3 of the major evaluation components, and that includes textbook analysis, student rating, and review of support materials, the final recommendation was made. And the AP Government Committee is recommending American Government Roots and Reform. This is published by Pearson Education, and it has a 2016 copyright. The total purchase for the AP textbook, including the test prep books that are available, is $46,845.23, and the funds for this adoption will come from the 2015-16 textbook budget. I have reviewed the AP Government textbook recommendation with the high school principals, and they support its purchase. These textbooks have been available in my outer office and will continue to be through the June 8th board meeting. At this time, Dr. Joan Livingston and I would be very happy to respond to any comments or questions that the board may have about this adoption.
Questions or comments? Mr. Centers?
We have delayed the purchase of a number of textbooks. Why are we going ahead and purchasing these ones, other than they're going to be a great resource? Why the timing with these?
The reason for that is that the AP Government requires us to have textbooks that align with their curriculum. And in order to provide up-to-date textbooks that align with the AP Government class, we need to have new textbooks. Because our current textbook is misaligned. And so in order for our students to continue to get AP credit, we have to have an aligned textbook.
Okay. So some of the other textbooks that we've kind of delayed and pushed back, this one, we
can't wait any longer for this one.
Unfortunately. Yep. Okay, thank you.
If I can just add to that, as we bring forward future recommendations for our budget for next year, we'll be looking again at delaying certain textbook purchases, and it's it'll be another very difficult decision for the board, because we're at a point in time where some of these things are beginning to impact the curriculum that we're offering in our schools. Having said that, as you know, we're trying to make it year by year, and as you know, save as many programs as we possibly can. As Sheila mentioned, we don't have any choice on this, otherwise we won't be able to provide AP credit, and that's not a direction that we want to go in. But we will be talking about other textbook purchases for next year, and that'll be part of the ongoing difficult discussions that we have as we finalize our budget for next year.
Anyone else? Mrs. McDonald?
I have a question, but I don't even know if you can answer this or not. And it relates to the AP courses offered throughout the district. One of my daughter's friends who attends Franklin said that she wasn't able to take an AP class at Franklin, that she had to take it through Schoolcraft. Can anyone explain what the differences is and why we aren't able to offer, or if it's accurate information? I mean, I don't think she would give me inaccurate information, but that's what she shared with me.
Dr. Lee, if you want
Yeah, I mean, there are certain classes that we don't offer in our schools, and in those cases, students do take them or have the opportunity to take them through dual enrollment at the community colleges. And so I don't know specifically what class
I don't
she's.
either,
Yeah,
so.
but it wouldn't be. We wouldn't be surprised to hear the kids. Maybe they want to take a French 5 class, or they may want to take a certain math class, and we may have exhausted those classes even through our AP classes here in our school district. And so then, in some cases, the students will go ahead and dual enroll in a university or a community college and take the class, and get what they would like through them.
And sometimes it's an unusual class that we wouldn't necessarily have enough students to fill a class.
Correct.
And for those singleton classes, then students would go to one of the community colleges and dual enroll for that
Another
class.
good example.
That's a great option then.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I was just curious because I never heard of that before, so it's wonderful. Thank you.
President Burton.
And for the benefit of those who may be listening, dual enrollment means that the student would be getting high school credit and college credit at the same time.
Correct.
Okay. And just for my own clarification, you're saying that back to the purchase of the AP government textbook, if we did not update our textbook, we could no longer offer AP government.
We could not offer, the students wouldn't get AP credit.
Okay.
For taking the class.
All right.
We must be aligned with the College Board's textbook and curriculum.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else?
Action.
Mrs. Bonnefield? Yeah,
Regular
regular
days.
agenda at the regular meeting of June 8th.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And President Burton, with that, we conclude the Curriculum Committee.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Finance Committee. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Burton. The Finance Committee will be addressing 7 issues tonight. We have further discussion on Perrinville and McKinley. We have a review of bid results for additional mobile devices, a review of bid results for document cameras, a review of bid results for copy paper, a potential cooperative agreement for Cooper Recreation Site, the 2014-15 final budget amendments, and finally the potential volleyball lease. So we have a pretty hefty agenda tonight. That being said, let's start right in on further discussion for Perrinville with Dr. Leopold.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jarvis. And as you know, we had scheduled to come to this committee meeting and have further conversation on the recommendations for next year's budget to close both McKinley and Perrinville. And so what we want to do tonight is try to accomplish a few things. First of all, I've provided quite a bit of information to you since the last time we met in committee and talked about this particular idea. And so what I want to do is review that information and provide any clarification that I can on the information that in most cases you have already received, and I'll go ahead and get that passed around to you. We also want to make sure that if there are any other questions or any other piece of information that you need as we move forward through this process, we want to make sure to get that from you so we can get that information to you as quickly as we possibly can. And I want to, again, recognize all of you because you've asked for actually quite a bit of information over the last several weeks, and that's good. And we appreciate the questions that you've had and the ideas that you brought forward, and we're very pleased to get that additional information to you. Last, I know that the board wants to discuss an added idea based on the feedback that we received from parents and staff in the forums. And so I know you guys have had some discussion and just informal discussion and have posed a couple of ideas. And so we can review those ideas tonight also. And so those are the things that we want to do as we continue to proceed on this particular topic and get closer to making a decision, which, as you know, we have to do one way or the other prior to us finalizing our budget next month. And so, again, I just want to start with a summary of the programs. And in your document that you have, you see a summary of each of the programs that we have at specifically at our Perrinville School. And so, as you know, we have the Early Childhood Program. That's a program for students who have developmental delays or disabilities that are typically mild in nature, such as speech delays or a mild ASD recognition. And with that, as you see, the enrollment is 168 students. These are preschool students, and so they're in school half a day, and so half would be there, approximately half would be there in the morning and half in the afternoon. We also have our ASD program, our autism program, which are for students that meet the criteria for the autism spectrum disorder and require more extensive programs and services. As you know, this is a county-wide program, and so we service students from all over the county in this particular program at Perrinville. And currently there are 42 students that attend half-time, approximately half in the morning and half in the afternoon. We have our Great Start Readiness preschool program. This is the 4-year-old state program that services students with individual factors or family factors that would impact potentially their ability to be ready for school. And we've listed the different criteria that's utilized for students that qualify for that program. We currently have 96 students in that program, and again, that is a half-day program, and so they would be split in regards to the time when they come to us. The Talk It Up program is an early childhood service program for students with either articulation difficulties and or mild speech delays. These students come a couple of days a week and participate in sessions to receive additional support. The class sizes, as you can see, are at 10, and there are a total of 30 students that receive that service through that program. We also have the MOCI program, the Moderate Cognitive Impaired program. These are programs for students who meet the criteria, again, of the moderate cognitive impairment as outlined in the county agreement throughout Wayne County. And again, they require more extensive programs and services. And this also is a countywide program. As you know, we service students from across the county in this program. You can see this year that we have an enrollment of 9 students. And lastly, the visually impaired program, again, a countywide program that's provided to meet more extensive program servicing for these students, and we have 4 students in that program. So that's a summary of the programs. And as I've highlighted, we've suggested different places where these programs could go, where we can maintain the programs but reduce our facility costs. And so I'll cover both the Perrinville program, the McKinley program, and how that impacts the Jackson program at those facilities. And so, as you know, we've talked about the GSRP statewide preschool program for 4-year-olds going to Rosedale and Cleveland. We've talked about the early childhood program going to Jackson. We've talked about the ASD program going to Roosevelt, the Talk It Up program going to Grant, and then the MOCI and VI program going to Webster. And you may recall that the MOCI program actually came from Webster just a few years ago. With the ECP program moving to Jackson, we do need to create some additional space at Jackson, and so we've talked about moving the Young Fives program, which is really a kindergarten program, although it's a developmental kindergarten program, half day. But those teachers are already supervised by a building administrator, and so we talked about moving that to a K-4 building, and we suggested Randolph. And then last at McKinley, we identified that we currently have high school classes at McKinley, and we feel that we can fit those classes in the main Franklin School building, which provides a variety of better options in regards to security and safety for those particular classes. We also have over at McKinley now adult education, ESL classes, and we have the offices for our shared time program. And as you know, the shared time program are services that we provide in a variety of parochial and private schools across the area. The offices are there, and we've suggested moving them to the Skills Center. And then we have a couple of preschool renters there, and we're still working on placement of those preschool renters, actually starting to find places where we think that it makes sense, and we're looking at our elementary schools for space to possibly take those programs and maintain the rent revenue that we're currently generating. And so if we made these types of changes, then again, we would be in a position to reduce a couple of facilities. And I'll just cover, again, real quickly what that looks like from a cost standpoint. And so this is actually an updated sheet that you see here. And so there are a few updated numbers that I would highlight when we look at the different columns here. And so under the general fund, as I mentioned, we're looking at savings from the actual facility costs, utilities, custodial costs, and so on, of about $310,000 for those 2 particular buildings. And we're looking at Perrinville being slightly higher, McKinley being slightly lower because we have slightly more custodial staff at the Perrinville location right now. And I want to highlight again that we have taken into consideration that there will be additional transportation costs if we were to make these changes. And so you can see that number is reflected in our overall estimated savings. There are also some other savings because as we combine building, not for the staff providing the programs to kids, but because of the overhead costs that we have for secretarial and other costs, we'll be able to do some consolidation there and save some money. And last, I would highlight that the one change that you see in the general operating budget, the general fund impact here, is that Lisa's been able to find some lease space for one of our rentors. And so that's why that number is a little bit lower than we had originally talked about. And we're actually hoping that number could go to 0, but we're not there yet. And so we don't want to count that money until we have identified that we're able to place those programs. And so what you see is a net change to the general fund of $331,000, and that would be part of our budget planning for next year if we were to move forward with this or some type of situation like this, where we would be able to reduce a couple of facilities. We talked about one-time cost also, and we've talked about the bond issue tonight. In the bond issue, we are looking at a savings of almost $1.5 million that would be able to go back into the bond fund to be utilized on our existing facilities. That's a net of $1.6 million that we currently have budgeted for both McKinley and for Perrineville, and that's offset by the fact that we do believe that if we're going to put any of the programs over at Roosevelt, that we would want to make sure that all the specifics for that program are met. And so we've drawn out different drawings in regards to how we could make sure that those rooms, actually the rooms would be beautiful in regards to meeting the needs of those particular programs. That would cost about $130,000, and that's why that cost comes down. Additionally, we're looking at potentially some costs in the sinking fund that we're looking at. And again, any cost in the sinking fund means that we would slightly delay any of our long-term sinking fund projects. But we do see that we will need some additional parking at the Skills Center. That's to meet the needs. If McKinley closes, we have to provide some additional parking there if we want to relocate the ESL and the adult education programs there, along with the offices for the shared time program. And then we do want to put some money into the rooms for Jackson Center in regards to where the students, the ECP students, would go. And so we set aside a dollar amount to do that. And also, if we needed a additional bus loop at Jackson, we wanted to make sure to put in a provision for that also. And so those one-time costs all come to about $558,000, of which about $200,000 is allocated towards the Ford Skills Center, and the others would be towards Jackson and/or Roosevelt. And so you can see the net on our one-time expenditures is a savings of just under $1 million. And again, a good chunk of savings that will go into the bond issue, and then that would be at a cost of some one-time additional cost through the sinking fund. And so that's what we're looking at as far as updated numbers of the savings and the different budgets that we're looking at for next year. The next sheet I would highlight for you is just a summary, and this is just more informational for you, a summary of what other school districts are doing with their preschool autistic ASD programs, and where they're going. As you can see, they're really all over the board. From the Garden City program, where they're looking at putting the preschool program where the K-12 program is it's actually the Autism Center that they have, to some schools that do have an early childhood center, other schools and school districts that have them in elementary schools. If you see my little notes on the side, that's just as I could quickly come up with how many schools or school districts are sending kids to those different programs. So two districts are going to Redford Union, 2 going to Dearborn, 14 to Lincoln Park. And that's incomplete, though. I have to get you a few additional numbers. This is just, as much as anything, more towards background information. Again, the story here is that the programs are being provided in a variety of different locations in different school districts across our county. And I do want to highlight, though, Plymouth Canton, that does need to be corrected there. As mentioned in our audience communications earlier this evening, they actually are looking at the former Allen Elementary School to house some of these programs, and they'll have many of those special education services at the Allen Preschool Center. They'll also have some general education classes there, and then they have 2 locations in their elementary schools where they'll have both gen ed and special education preschool classes there. So I do appreciate Ms. Noah contacting us and giving us a heads up on that, so we could also follow up and talk to Plymouth Canton in regards to what they're doing. So that's a summary of what they're doing in other school districts in regards to where the programs are located. What I have attached, and I'm not going to go through this in detail because you've had a chance to look at it. We'll certainly be happy to answer any questions that you have, but we did provide the Q&A for you late last week, And we are ready to get a cover letter out, get that out to our parents at Perrinville so they can see this, and then also put it on our website so anybody in the community that would like to see the questions and answers from what we received in the community forums can go online and take a look at that. The additional consideration that you brought forward that I know you want to have some conversation about has to do with the issue, probably the biggest issue that we've all heard as we've gone through these last several weeks, and that is the issue of the ASD program being separated from the early childhood program and the benefits that are deemed to be lost with that particular splitting of the programs. And so one of the things that you've asked me to do, and I've been able to do, is to look at what it would cost to put some additional rooms onto McKinley. Not McKinley, but Jackson, yes, thank you. And so as we look at that, what that would do is it would provide the opportunity for the ECP program, the autism program, and our Gen Ed preschool programs to all be together. And at the same point in time, we're still going to be able to generate the facility savings in our general fund as we're trying to get towards our budget issues. And so I would anticipate some additional costs, because we'll have some additional utility costs if we put some additional classrooms over there. But that's usually pretty minor in regards to the overall projected savings of between $300,000 and $350,000 that we're looking at. And so, again, I think that's based on what you guys have heard and your sincere efforts to try to address some of the biggest concerns that we have heard through the process, yet at the same point in time recognizing that we have some tough budget decisions to make here. So if we wanted to do that, that would cost about $1.3 to $1.4 million. If we were to do that, that is one-time expenditure and could come from our sinking fund. And so again, what that would allow us to do is to generate the savings again in our general fund where we've got our biggest issues and our biggest challenges going into the next couple of years. It would allow us to continue to save the money there and actually still save the money in the bond issue because the bond issue funds are the bond issue funds. What it would do, of course, is delay whatever sinking fund projects that we have on an ongoing basis. But if that was an investment that you thought was a priority, we could spend that money out of the sinking fund and be able to house those programs together. So, I wanted to bring that to you today. And I think that's the major thing that I really wanted to bring out because, again, a lot of the other information is information that we've been piecemealing to you over the last several weeks, and information updated a little bit, but really outlines a lot of the things that we've been looking at in the past. So, I'll go ahead and we'll get into any clarifications that I can provide as it relates to the information, any additional information that you might need as we get closer to making a decision for our budget planning for next year, and of course, hear conversation that you'd like to have if you'd like us to move ahead on this idea about adding some classrooms onto Jackson. Just a couple of last comments before we move ahead. If we actually, at some point in time, approve the recommendations and save this facility money of about $300,000 to $350,000, that will get us to about $2.2 million in revenue enhancement cost-saving items for next year. As you know, we have about $900,000 that we have planned, hopefully for the sale of cell towers. We have about $1 million planned for the sale of the current Washington and Nankin Mills properties, and we would be looking at that. So that's about $2.2 million, and I'd want to highlight a couple of things. Number one, we still have about probably over $1 million to go. So we're not home with these recommendations yet. We've got about another $1 million of tough decisions that we're going to have to make in order to have a balanced budget by the end of June of this year, number one. Secondly, I'd highlight that the cell towers that we're talking about You've allowed us to go ahead and pursue an agreement to do that, but we do not have the agreement yet. And so I just want to highlight that that's not a done deal yet. And if you remember, we tried this 2 or 3 years ago and we were unsuccessful. And so I only say that because if that doesn't come to fruition, that's $900,000 that we still have to come up with for next year's budget. It's the same for the property. I'm more confident with the property in regards to being able to sell it. In fact, we are hoping by June 3rd to have the bids in for people bidding on those properties for redevelopment into single-family homes. But that isn't a done deal yet either. So I just want to highlight those two things, and the fact that even if those two things come to fruition, and we actually are closing some facilities to save some money, we still got over $1 million to go before we're home to finish this up in June. And as I said, we're going to work really hard, and our goal is to protect programs, and that is the game plan as we move ahead with our recommendations. The other thing I want to mention is 2016-2017. Because what happens is when we look at, again, doing some of these things, as our community suggested we do, to protect programs for next year, we have to know that when we start the 2016-2017 year, the money that we're going to generate next year from cell towers or from the land sale is gone. And so we have to back those out of our projections for the 2016-2017 year, which means we're back to the grindstone in regards to finding different cost-saving revenue enhancement ideas for 2016-2017, not just to start the year $2 million down to where we will be next year, which is running some type of operating deficit and barely ending up with an overall balanced budget with our savings account. And so that's very, very important, because then in 16-17 again, we have to realize that not only will we have utilized some of those one-time opportunities, but if we lose another 200 to 300 kids, that money goes down. If we only get another $50 per student increase, that means that's not going to cover the loss in the enrollment, and that's going to exacerbate the problem, which is what we've been talking about for quite some time now. The other things I would highlight is that in order for us to meet these budget targets, we do have to meet our targets in regards to enrollment, which means we have to somehow only lose 200 students. If that comes in at 240 students, we're going to be 40 students short. If it comes in at 160, we'll be throwing a party in the fall. But we have to be aware of that's an unknown. We also have to know that in our initial projections as we're sitting here, we projected a $50 per student increase in our overall funding from the state. Now, at this point in time, they've proposed anywhere from $0 to $25 per student of an increase. We're hoping that as they finalize their budget for next year for all school districts, that number will be somewhere close to our $50. But we're not there yet either in regards to that particular projection. So I just want to keep those things in mind as we're looking at these targets. And when I say we still have $1 million to go, it could be a little bit more than $1 million if any of these things go in the opposite direction. Let's hope they go in the good direction. But we have a lot of planning to do, and as you know, we're required to have a budget passed in June moving into next year. And the last thing I would just highlight is I think one thing I know for sure is that regardless of what we decide to do here, whether it's maintain and keep Perrinville open, close Perrinville and McKinley, move the programs all to Jackson, move some to Roosevelt, some to Jackson, whatever we decide to do here. Having lived through many of these types of decisions over the last 12 years, one thing I do know is that our staff will step up and they will take care of our kids. They always have, and they always will. So with that, I'll go ahead. Like I said, if there's anything that I can clarify for you on the information I provided, I'd be happy to do that. If you need additional information, I'll make sure to get that down, and we will make sure to get that information to you. And certainly are interested in regards to your feedback if you'd like me to continue to pursue this idea of adding classrooms on at McKinley.
Jackson.
I keep on saying McKinley.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Jackson.
Can I, Dr. Leopold, can I make a request?
Mm-hmm. That's why we're here.
Is there any way that we can separate our discussions from McKinley and Perrinville in the future?
Sure.
I think McKinley, we've sort of got a consensus going about. Perrinville, there's a lot of other discussions. I don't know if, personally, I would like if we could separate those.
Well, let me just ask you, are you guys comfortable from a consensus standpoint to move forward on McKinley?
I'm good.
Okay, I'm hearing, so we're ready to go. Now, so we just have Perrineville to talk about that.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that consideration. Thank you, board. So I need some clarification on the numbers of students at Perrineville. And hopefully I did my math right. I'm totaling that right now, according to the sheet that you gave us, the snapshot, there's 349 students at Perrineville.
Yes, 349 students that are there by and large for half a day.
Okay.
So at any one time, you divide that by 2, and that would give you an idea of how many students in the building.
It's 394 kids that
That's how
are
many kids we're
attending at
servicing.
some, or 49
Yes.
sometime. So from our discussions, and correct me if I'm wrong, 294 of those kids are in the ECP, the GSRP, and the Talk It Up program, which is a total of 294 kids.
Correct.
And the potential for these 294 kids is that the vast majority will go into gen ed.
I don't know if that would be an accurate statement at all. Jen, I'll look to Jen. We'll bring Jen Terrio up, our resident special education expert.
I have a point to my question, so
I
if I
understand.
can get some clarification, then I'll move on
The
to
GSRP
one.
kids, as we know, by and large, will be attending a kindergarten program. Many of the ECP kids, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, do you have an idea or just a gut reaction on that, Jennifer?
I would say over the past few years, we've had approximately 30%, 30 to 50% of our students return to general ed.
Okay.
And that is in ECP or?
ECP, correct.
And where would the other students go?
They would go to our local centers, or if it was determined that they required more extensive services, then they would go to one of our county programs.
Okay, so out of the ECP kids, about 30% go to gen ed?
Correct.
Great Start Readiness Program, how many of those kids go to gen
It
ed?
depends. It depends on staffing.
Half? Quarter? None?
I would say more than half.
Okay. And then on the Talk It Up program, most of those, how many of those kids go on to be in gen ed? About?
When you say general education?
General education, they're going to move into a kindergarten program.
Right, well, all of them would move into a kindergarten program. If they continue to require speech therapy, then they would have an IEP that would follow them. They'd be in a general ed.
No, yes, I understand that they would continue, but they would, so about maybe 50% of the kids at Perrineville are going to move into a general education program.
Yeah, I'd have to find out.
And we'll go back and get this, make sure it's in your packet on Thursday.
Okay.
Specifically, some clear, as opposed to Jen just taking guesses on this.
That's fine.
Mhm.
So my concern is that we've got a lot of these kids are going to go into general education, and for the sake of this conversation, assuming that they all remain in LPS, obviously they're not, but just for the sake of the conversation.
In those particular programs, they're all LPS kids.
But not all of them will necessarily stay in the district. There may be some.
There may be a few that would be in a county program somewhere else, but that would be pretty.
Okay, so
Well, anyways.
My concern here is that, we're talking about moving these programs, and obviously there's going to be changes if they're in other buildings, but substantially the programs are going to be the same. We're going to provide the same atmosphere, the same teachers. These kids have another 13 years in LPS, and I'm looking at the list of other items that we're talking about and may, with or without the closure of Perrineville and the reallocation of the classes, may have to close. And I'm looking at increased class sizes, closing elementary buildings, canceling specials like music, canceling high school electives, stopping transportation for the district. We just got done talking about withholding textbooks. And as much as this is a great program for our district, my concern is that we're being very, we could be very short-sighted with these kids if we're taking away other great programs or abilities that in our district, and we're gonna leave the programs at Perrinville for 2 years and then take away other opportunities for their next 13 years in LPS. Because I think those are some of the things that we're closing. I heard tonight from, you know, that you know, we're poking a hole in the ship. I'm not seeing any of these as good publicity for our district. I'm not seeing that any of these things that we're doing that are not going to negatively impact our students. And I think for me, one of the big issues I'm having is if we're going to move programs and maintain them substantially in the format that they are in, I'm going to have a hard time calling parents and telling them that we're closing their kids' closing some programs. Are we going to close MACAT? Are we going to shut down the IB program? Are we going to close Webster? Are we going to close ACAT? I mean, moving classes, I think, is much less damaging to our kids in our district than actually shutting down programs or increasing class sizes. And I think the fallout is if we don't do this, we're going to be impacting these kids for the next 13 years. If we have maxed out our class sizes for these kids when they may potentially be, you know, they already are beginning with needing a little extra help. If we bump our class sizes up from 26, Dr. Leopold, our current class sizes are 26 to 28 on average.
Correct.
And if we increase our class sizes, what are our class sizes? 30 to 32, I believe.
The max?
Yeah.
Max would be, I believe, yeah, it varies a grade, somewhere between 30 and 35.
Okay, so we're going to take these kids that need, you know, extra help and move them from classrooms with 26 kids to 30 to 35 kids for the next 13 years. And that really concerns me.
Other clarifying questions or added information needed?
Mr. Sims.
Thank you. Obviously, there are no good solutions here. And, you know, a lot of us have heard the concerns about separating ASD, especially from early childhood. And there are a lot of issues with closing Perrinville, but that seems like the one that's most concerning to people. I appreciate you and your team making an effort to investigate Jackson Center and the addition. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How many buildings we would need to add on? What the time frame might look like to get that done?
Yeah, I mean, if the board gave us a go-ahead, what we would do is we would identify an architect to go ahead and actually go to the building and look specifically at where it would make most sense to add on rooms. You're probably looking at about 5 rooms for that kind of money. And so we would be looking at, you know, the actual layout of the facility, where those rooms would go, where would make the most sense, and then come back with some schematic design drawings. And, you know, as you know from our bond issue project, if you go through that entire process, it's usually a several-month process before we would come up with any specifics. We would bring the design to you, and then if approved, we can go out and start to bid those that work and get done. So, as you know, we're beginning that work right now for our 2016 summer projects, and so, you know, this would fit right into that work to be able to do that sometime in the summer of 2016. That was probably what would make the most sense.
Okay.
But again, we would want to get started on that process sooner rather than later, so we can get good information back to you, give you an idea what that looks like, and get us rolling in the process, so we're not, we wouldn't want to waste any time.
Now, Jen, can I put you on the spot again? Do you feel like that would help us meet the needs of the ASD kids as far as a lot of the concerns parents and staff have had, specifically as having those ECP kids, as mentors for kids with autism.
Along with the general ed preschool already at Jackson?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions at this time? President Burton.
Yes, a few things. Dr. Leva, for the benefit of those in the public who may not be as familiar as we are with the terms sinking fund, bond fund, and general fund, correct me if I'm wrong, general fund is where we have our problems. General fund is the money that we get from the state, primarily from the state, and that is what we can use to pay our salaries, to pay our textbooks. Salaries, by the way, are about 90% of our budget because we are a people teaching people business as opposed to producing a physical product. But the general fund is, we get our money primarily from the state. We use that to pay our salaries, to pay our textbooks, to pay our supplies, to pay our utilities, our ongoing costs for running the day-to-day business of the district. That is the fund that we pay for our Perrinville building out of, and that is the fund that our state, we wind up, as Livonia Public Schools, as most districts in the state, and Livonia is one of them, we wind up with less and less each year. Part of the reason we wind up with less and less is that even though the state may say they've given us a $25 increase or a $50 increase per student, so you read that in the newspaper, you hear that on the radio, you think, great, we've got extra money coming to our district. However, when we have 200 to 300 students that we lose per year with declining enrollment, because we are an aging community, and we're not losing any more percentage-wise than other districts are in the state. We continue to have about 1% of the students, and we still do have about 1% of the students in the state. So we battle the small increase in funding from the state against losing 200 to 300 students per year, and that, yippee, we got $25 or $50 extra per student, turns into we lost $2 million this year, again. That is the situation with the general fund, which is why we try to save any money that we can that would have to be spent out of the general fund, i.e. running in Perrinville, among many other things that we're going to have to look at. The bond fund we addressed earlier tonight. The bond fund is money that was approved by the voters just a couple of years ago, and it can only and very strictly be used for the items that were on the ballot when we asked for the bond fund, such as technology and security upgrades in our buildings, the building additions, the mechanical, electrical upgrades, et cetera. Those types of items can come out of the bond fund. We cannot pay for teachers, utility costs, textbooks, any of that out of the bond fund. Sinking fund, we collect, is that about $5 million per year in sinking fund?
I think we're about $5 million per year, Lisa?
Almost.
Almost.
And that cannot be used for any maintenance costs on our buildings. It can only be used for repairs, if I'm not mistaken.
Repairs and renovations.
And renovations, upgrades to our buildings.
Correct.
Again, that sinking fund money cannot be used for operating a building or salaries or textbooks or anything along that line. Can't be used to pay the electrical bills, nothing along that line. But we can use that sinking fund money to pay to put extra building or extra rooms onto the Jackson Center. And then we would have the nominal cost of electricity and so forth that we would pay out of the general fund.
Correct.
And that is why the option of putting some rooms onto the Jackson Center, as I understand it, would financially work for the district. We have the money in the sinking fund, albeit we would be using it for other building projects in the district. But we diverted that $1.3 or so million to Jackson Center. We have that money that we legally can use, and we actually physically have it coming in each year. We could put that into the Jackson Center and answer at least what I'm hearing is the number one concern with the entire proposal of Perrinville, which is splitting up the ECP kids from the ASD kids and losing that possible interaction that we have there. Financially, that's why the Jackson Center option works. And thank you for bearing with me through some of that explanation. I'm hoping that that's a bit helpful for those of us, or for those who are listening to this. Let me see here. The Allen preschool in Plymouth Canton, Dr. Liepa, if I understand correctly, by combining their special ed program preschoolers with some of their tuition-based preschoolers, in essence, what they're doing is recreating Jackson Center as opposed to recreating Perrinville. Am I correct in that assessment of the situation?
I would suggest on the latest information that we've received from Perrinville that there will be more special education services in their program than there will be gen ed programs.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't quite describe it as that.
Okay, so there are some of both, but it's more of a special education.
Yes, what they've done is that they're actually closing their current special education preschool center, which is Tanger, which they've moved programs out of that particular site, and they still have some special education preschool programs in that particular site, and they are closing that site. They're going to put a good chunk of that over at the Allen Center, along with some gen ed preschool programs. And as I mentioned, they're going to leave some of the programs where they have special education preschool and general education preschool in two of the elementary schools that they currently have them in. So it's a bit of a hybrid, I guess you could say.
Okay, so there's a combination then of gen ed and special needs preschoolers in each one of their three facilities where they will have preschoolers at this point. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
And again, I would highlight that's one school. We have other districts that have pure early childhood centers, and we have other school districts that have the entire program in a K-5 elementary school.
I wanted clarification on this one specifically because, as you did, I received an email asking about that specific building and that specific program. I needed to understand that a little bit better. I would love to keep the Perrinville building open. However, I don't know how it's fiscally possible or responsible to do so, given what we're given by the state, which is less and less money each year to work with, and next year looks worse than this year did. That being said, we've heard, or at least I should say I have heard over and over, that the number one concern is splitting those two programs. I'm not hearing as much concern with the Great Start program going into the buildings where they will likely be going to kindergarten. The MOCI and VI program, I've not heard as much concern about that program going to Webster as it came from Webster, and a lot of those kids will continue on in the Webster. So those two are logical moves. What I'm hearing is enormous concern that ECP and ASD programs would be split. If the possibility of adding on to the Jackson Center and allowing those two programs to stay together is realistic, that is something that I would like to continue to pursue, because that's the part of this whole program that makes me not sleep at night. And I know that I'm not alone. Everyone can speak for themselves, but enough of us have been talking to each other that there's a lot of stress on this board and in this administration over this whole decision, and that's one enormous piece there. So if we're able to work toward getting those two programs to stay together in Jackson, that's something I'm very interested in continuing to look at.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders?
I'm going to echo that sentiment. We have to, like always, do the best we can with what we've got. There's so much that has gone into Perrinville. It's a beautiful school. We got to worry about the kids, all the kids in the district. And, you know, I have heard over and over about these kids in the ASD program and how they really need to be with the ECP. And I've heard it from enough people that I'm really convinced that, you know, there's a lot of merit to this. Again, this isn't going to be perfect. Not everyone's going to go away happy, and, you know, including us. It's tough stuff. But I applaud you for making the effort to find a solution that's the best we can do with what we got. So I'm going to encourage you to, you know, my personal belief is to go forward add on to Jackson using the sinking fund money and, do what we can to provide the best for these kids.
And I just want to recognize the board, because it was you guys racking your heads saying, what can we do to address some of the biggest issues that we've been hearing about, and you guys said, hey, we'd really like you to go and look into this for us. And so if that's what the majority of the board would like to do, we'd be happy to do that.
I just want to get, before I forget your comment, make my own. I want to echo the echoing and say that it's not often that an opportunity presents itself where we can, in fact, find a situation that would be agreeable. Again, the biggest problem was separating the ASD program with the ECP program. If we can keep those two programs together, they have a certain synergy, and if we can keep that together and move them together to buildings that we would be building specifically built to suit, not trying to take and stick them in an existing room like a square peg in a round hole. But if we were to build classrooms to suit for them, move them intact, not only would that be a good move for us in terms financially, but it would be good for the program educationally, emotionally, and socially as well. For those of you who aren't aware, President Obama just released a request for greater inclusion for preschools for kids with disabilities. And while it's not a mandate yet, it's looking like it could become one. And if we were to move these programs intact, not only would they have the same synergy retained, but there's the possibility of inclusion with the other preschool programs already at Jackson. So we would be anticipating a possible federal mandate, which would be a whole heck of a lot better than moving children this year and then having to move them again to address this federal mandate. So that's a wonderful thing.
And I would highlight that to meet that mandate, it really is, it's not the ECP kids and the ASD kids together, it's the ECP kids and the ACD kids with the Gen Ed preschoolers.
Exactly.
Which we have at Jackson right now.
It takes a really ugly situation and I think presents it in the best possible light. So I would hope that you would continue to pursue that possibility. Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Dr. Leopa, I know Mrs. Bonnefeld asked, and I think all of us are agree we want to keep this separate from McKinley to Perrinville. But can you break down for us the cost-saving difference between the figures that you're giving to the board today?
Yeah, so when you're looking at Perrinville, out of that $300 and some thousand, the larger portion on the facility cost is Perrinville. It's a little over $160,000. We also backed off the assumption that we're going to have to spend $50,000 or more on transportation, because we're going to have transportation in there. And so we're backing that off of the savings in Perrinville. But then because we're able to combine the Perrinville and McKinley facilities, we also think there are some overhead costs, not cost in relating to providing any service to these kids. All those positions will be intact. But there are some overhead costs that we can reduce. And so that pushes the savings specifically for the Perrinville program over $200,000. The McKinley program is, I think, if I remember, it's about a little under $150,000 in facility savings. And then we backed off a portion of what we're anticipating to be lost revenue from the renters, which, as I mentioned, we're in better shape today than we were when we shared that information with you several weeks ago. I think it's about $35,000 now, and we're hoping that we may be able to recoup a portion of that. So we're looking between the savings to be a little over $100,000 at McKinley, and it could be up to about $140,000 to $150,000 if we get those renters placed. That's the breakdown between the two.
Okay, and you indicated that Ms. Abbey said that potentially that one of the leases could be saved. And exactly where are we anticipating moving that program, those leases?
We're looking at elementary schools right now. Randolph, I believe, is one school that we're looking at where we have some space. And then we're looking at a couple of other elementary schools where we have space right now for the other. But we haven't been able to finalize that yet.
And the funding from Perrinville as it sits now, how much money is generated by that program or the general fund?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, is it costing us money to keep these programs open, or are we?
The county is definitely costing us money for the general education programs, or the local special education programs. And so those would be the ECP programs and the Talk It Up programs. Those two particular programs, any of our special education programs cost us above and beyond what we receive from the state for our foundation allowance, and then the additional funds we received for added costs through state categoricals. And so typically we're short, I can't remember the specific percentage, but it's pretty large percentage that we're short on our special education programs. It would be the same for our Buchanan Center. It would be the same for our Cass Center, where those students are primarily Livonia Public School students. The programs at Perrinville that are county paid for, which are the very small VI program, the very small MOCI program, and the ASD program, those are funded through the county, and so those costs to the general fund for all the salaries, the staff, and all that, that's all covered through the county special education budget, and that is 100% paid for. Okay. Separate from that, then you have the GSRP program, and the GSRP program is, again, a state-funded program, and so the GSRP program costs are covered through the state grant. Not the facility costs; those go to the general operating budget, but the cost of those two particular programs, staff, paraprofessionals, materials, et cetera, those are covered by both the countywide center program and by the state GSRP program.
Okay, and Niji Euro, where are we at on enrollment projections for that school for next year?
We're over 100 students and growing right now.
And they are coming from just returns or?
Combination.
Combination. Okay. So, I don't know. I just don't feel that, $200,000 for most of us is a lot of money, but $200,000 out of $140 million to me is not enough to change, changing these programs. It's just such a small amount of money. And I can't believe that we can't find $200,000 elsewhere in the budget to retain that.
Mrs. McDonald, can I make a comment to that? Dr. Lipa just finished telling us that with the $200,000, we are still at $1 million. We're still looking for another $1 million. We need to close another 5 Perrinvilles to get there. It's not like if we can change somewhere else. If we find $200,000 somewhere else, then we'll be at $800,000 that we need to find. I'm not sure where you think that we are going to find $200,000.
I don't know. That's why we need a line item budget. We go over it line by line, and we don't do that. We don't have that.
President Burton.
One thing that's happened this year that I heard about, which was distressing, and it's a route I do not want to go. And it's a route Livonia Public Schools is choosing not to go. And that was Dearborn saying, we're simply no longer going to house the county-wide hearing program. And it literally sends all the students back to their home districts, and they can, Ms. Terrell, can you explain exactly what happens in a case like that? Because you're nodding your head like you are very familiar, more so I'm sure than I.
Yes, those students will go back to their resident district, and the resident district has the legal obligation to offer a free and appropriate public education in regard to the hearing impaired program. Dearborn operates a total communication program, so Detroit would be an option. But if we had to provide the programs and services here in Livonia, it would require a huge cost to the district.
Yeah, it's something that I absolutely don't want to do, and I don't believe that that's best for students. Hence the creation of countywide programs. When there are handfuls of kids with different types of disabilities, if we can put them together and serve their needs, it's best for districts. It's also best for those students who have then like peers with similar disabilities. This is a list I asked Dr. Liepa for before our meeting, because I've heard from a few people and that this is the first thing we're cutting, or this is the only thing we're cutting, or why is it Parentville that we're cutting? And this is important to note. This is only going back 5 years. This is not going back 10 years, and we've been cutting for 10 years, but just within the last 5 years, and this is after we closed Marshall Elementary School, this is after we closed about 6 or 8 other schools through the Legacy Initiative, and laid off a lot of employees. This is since then, and this is not a complete list, this is just a partial list of the closures or program cuts that have taken place to get us to where we are today, just to survive with the state cuts. Since 2009-10, and this is on top of the $28 million cut from 2001 to that date, we have cut classroom teachers above the declining enrollment to the tune of nearly $5 million. That's above and beyond. That's classes that we're going to pack classes tighter. We're going to not offer some courses that we used to offer to students at lots of levels. $5 million in classroom teacher cuts. Student support staff, including we've cut counselors, we have cut learning specialists, we have cut student assistant staff, and we have eliminated the reading recovery program. These are things that have happened at, I believe, Dr. Liepa, the elementary and middle and high school levels.
Correct.
We have, and that was over $2 million. Over $1 million in kindergarten parapros, which, if you're not familiar with kindergarten, may not sound like much, but when you take a kindergarten parapro out of every kindergarten classroom and you've got one teacher with an average of 22 to 25 kids all day long, that's a lot. There's a that's a $1,200,000 cut. We have cut supplies, teaching materials, equipment, and textbooks, as you've heard partial textbook discussion tonight, to the tune of $2,400,000. We know, this board knows, that some of our textbooks are out of date and we can't afford to replace them. They have geographic countries that don't exist any longer, and they're still in our textbooks because we can't afford to replace them. We have cut almost $500,000 of professional development. That's teachers learning from experts on how to do their job better to serve our students. We have $2 million in administrative or secretarial support that's been cut out of our district. In this central office alone, used to be run by 16 administrators, now is run by 8. We have over $1 million in maintenance, custodial, data, and printing costs that has been eliminated from the budget. We have $750,000 in reduced transportation services. Back a few years ago, when I was newly on the board, it was discussion about whether or not we're going to even offer busing in Livonia Public Schools. That does not apply to special education because that is a mandated cost, but for all other students in Livonia Public Schools, it was discussion of whether or not we're even going to be able to afford to provide buses or not. What happened was a rerouted the whole busing system, basically. We have reduced athletic programs, and we've charged students pay to participate fees of $500,000. We have over $1 million in other implementation of of miscellaneous cost savings and revenue enhancements, and another $1 million of other budgetary reductions. I'm saying all this to let the public know there have been drastic cuts in the last 10 years. $28 million in the first 5, 17 more million within this past 5 years. This board and this administration doesn't take any of this lightly. But we have to make sure that we have the funds to provide for the Perrinville students' needs today. We also have to make sure that since these students will not be in Perrinville for more than another few years, we have to make sure that we have the money and the budget set up for what these Perrinville students, in addition to the other 15,000 students in the district, are going to need in 2 to 3 years when they're in kindergarten, first or second grade. We have to know today we're set up to meet those needs. We have to have this budget today so that it has learning assistance and other assistance that are going to be needed 5 to 6 years from now when those students are in 5th and 6th grade. And we have to make sure we have today classroom sizes and assistance that's manageable 10 years down the road when these students are in high school. Because we are charged with making sure that the needs of all 15,000 students are met. I don't want to close this building at all. I didn't want to see my own kids' elementary school close, and I know many of the folks sitting at this board had elementary schools that closed. But if it's necessary to close a building in order to save the programs and the teachers who are highly trained and highly dedicated in front of these kids every day, I'd rather move the kids and the teachers to a different building to meet their needs in order to make sure that we don't have to make more cuts that impact students. We've tried so very hard as an administration and as a board to keep the cuts out of the classroom, and it's beginning to go in, and it's not acceptable. We've got to find ways to make sure that these kids have what they need in front of them every day.
Thank you, President Burton. I, for one, would like to thank Mrs. McDonald for reminding us that these programs are expensive and that it comes out of our general fund, which is predominantly provided to us by Lansing in the form of the foundation allowance. For those of you who are not aware, Senate Bill 39 is up before the state, and this bill would repeal the investigation that was being made into how much it actually costs to educate a child in Michigan. They were going to look at costs for general ed programs, for special need programs, for autism programs, for part-time, full-time, every kind of variation in every district. Now, it really wouldn't take a lot of effort to do this because every district around there knows their own numbers. They could probably have that information on their desk by the end of the month. But they instead want to repeal that, which frankly represents a gross negligent loss of fiduciary responsibility and transparency. Apparently, the Senate does not feel it's important to know how much something costs before they decide how much they're going to pay. And I encourage everyone to let them know that that's not acceptable and to vote down Senate Bill 319 so that we can continue to service our children, service our community, and do our jobs. Any other comments? Mrs. Laura.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. As my board members know, I've been gone for the last week, and so I'm behind. I'm playing catch-up right now, so I'm sitting here very quietly in the information mode. I came home just yesterday and have done nothing but try to catch up. I've talked to some of my board members to try and get caught up, reading emails, as I said, and so I'm taking in all this information, trying to make a very conscientious decision. But I would like, in my opinion, also to get more information of adding space to Jackson and see what comes out of that also.
So what I'm hearing is I have I'm sorry.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Mrs. McDonald.
Dr. Leopold, as far as, isn't Perrinville in better shape than Jackson Center, physically?
Yeah, I would actually think it's physically in good shape. As we've talked about, as you saw in the Q&A, the number of rooms in both facilities are approximately the same. And so the central location has been a real benefit for all of the programs currently at McKinley, and something that we see moving. I keep on saying McKinley. Yeah, McKinley is not center located.
We're keeping it separate.
Yes, yes. So Jackson Center, thank you. Yeah.
And that's approximately how far away from each other? 'Cause they're on the same road, right?
Yeah, same road, a few miles down the road.
I only have 1.8 miles.
Mrs. Bonifield.
Jen, I'm going to put you on the spot again, and it's something that's been bothering me, and I'm not really sure how to say it politically correct, but or if you're going to be able to answer my question, but we hear a lot about how Perrinville is impacting all of these students, and that these kids are making so much progress because they're in the building, and they're doing so well because they're in the building, and if we take them out of the building, that they are not going to flourish. My concern is that where's the teaching staff in all this? I would think that it would be the teaching staff and the caring individuals in the school that would have the most impact on our students rather than the location. Is that not true?
Perrinville has wonderful teaching staff and itinerant staff that provide wonderful programs and services to our students, and they make a huge impact on the progress those students make.
Is the location of the program more impactful than the teachers?
The teachers provide the service to the students. They make the impact on student progress.
Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. I too have been in sort of the information mode, but that's what we're talking about is what makes this job so difficult, because we're in a position where we can't not do something. We're in a financial position where action is required, and regardless of what we do, there's going to be someone who's not going to be happy. And that makes this decision all that much more difficult, because we cannot forget about the 15,000 students overall that we are charged with taking care of. We understand there are 340-some students at Perrinville, but we cannot forget the other 15,000 students that we have to take care of. And we're in a position, not of our own making, but the making by the legislator, who have not funded these programs. And as Dr. Lipa has pointed out time and time again, we have, and as Mrs. Burton has pointed out, we have made huge cuts, and we cannot keep up. And that is not our fault, because this administration has done everything possible to keep our heads above water without cutting programs. And regardless of what we do here, we will not be cutting a program. Regardless of whether it's moved all to Jackson or whether it's split into other schools, the programs will remain. The teachers will remain. The staff will remain. So I think those are just some things that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. Thank you, Mrs. Jones.
Are there any other comments? At this point, we have a majority who are requesting additional work to be done on the possibility of creating new space at Jackson to accommodate a combined move between the ADS and the ECP program. So please, if Dr. Leopold will add that to your to-do list.
I will.
And this is not ready for a vote, therefore there's no need to add this to the agenda for the regular meeting.
Actually, you need to look at this in regards to the actual program change. We'll decide in regards to the costs and so on with the Jackson Center, but before June 30th, we have to make a decision as it relates to whether we're going to close the facility or not. And remember, we've got, staff that are going to be leaving, people are going to be packing up and so on. So our initial timeline really was to have this meeting here tonight, and then on June 8th, at our next regular board meeting, have the vote.
Can we split out firstly the vote so that we have two votes, one on McKinley?
Yes.
And then one on Jackson? We can certainly put McKinley on the regular agenda.
Sure.
President Burton, do you recommend, what is your recommended action for the agenda for regarding Jackson Center then, for the regular meeting?
Regarding Jackson Center?
Right, if we need to have a vote by next month.
Well, Dr. Lepek, do I understand you correctly that what we're needing to vote on would be the McKinley piece? And
then also the Parentville piece, and if you wanted to, what you would put in that, motion for the Parentville piece is clear direction for the administration, as you've provided tonight, to continue to look at adding space onto the Jackson Center program. You could actually have that as part of your motion, so we would have specific direction in moving forward.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Don't shoot me, guys. We don't have a meeting next week.
No,
Do we need?
It's the 8th.
It's the 8th of June.
June 8th.
I understand that our next voting meeting is the 8th. We don't have a meeting next week on the 1st. Do we need to have another meeting for discussion?
The only thing that I have as far as question goes is from tonight, additional information that the board needs is how many students are potentially going to general education out of the different programs. That's the only thing you've asked me to follow up on. Now, the bigger issue in regards to the classrooms, that can be done. We just won't have the specifics of that until we move forward. And again, that would be part and parcel of your motion at that particular point in time. Now, I'm not saying that you may not have additional information that you need tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday. As always, we ask you to contact us in that regard. But right now, I don't have anything else to bring back to you next Monday.
Is it possible to get a breakout like this regarding the Jackson Center addition?
Yeah.
So that we can
A more
see-
detailed
Right.
breakdown?
The budget impact? Mrs. McDonald?
Thank you. Dr. Leva, what would be the potential time frame to add those 5 rooms onto Jackson Center?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, what we'd want to do is start the process just like we do at any of our schools. And so we would start the process now, we would get architects involved, they would go out and visit the site, then they would start to do schematic design, they would bring back to the Board of Education. That would come back, you guys would look at it and say, yeah, it looks like that makes sense, that can work. They'll have a better projection in regards to what the costs are at that point in time. And then we would actually start to create the bids. So you guys know the routine on this because we've done that 100 times with not 100 times, but we've done it with all the bond issue projects and the sinking fund projects. And so we would be in the loop of doing it right now with all of the other renovations that we're looking at for the summer of 2016. I mean, obviously, we can't tear the building up in the middle of the school year.
Okay, so it'd be a year out then before we could even do that.
Yes, we would do the work next summer.
Okay.
So, Dr. Lepa, for the June 8th motion, what you're saying you need from the board is direction on whether or not we will be moving the Parentville program, whether it be to Roosevelt or to Jackson, but you're needing direction in the form of a vote on June 8th as to whether or not we will be moving the Parentville programs.
Correct. So the motion would be to relocate the programs. And again, my suggestion, just to solidify what the board has directed us to do, would be also then to continue the process of looking at adding rooms onto Jackson. That seems to be what the board wants to do, but I would tie it right into the motion. So if you're telling us, well, we'll go ahead and look at relocating the programs, but only if we're going to look at also being able to have the ECP program and the ASD program together, then I would suggest that be part of the same motion.
Okay.
That would be clear direction then for the administration.
Okay. And from what I'm hearing from the board, that appears to be the direction that we have consensus in, as opposed to any discussion of continuing to entertain the thought of putting the ASD program at Roosevelt.
Right.
Do I have consensus that we are looking at moving the ASD program along with the ECP program into Jackson Center so that they may stay together? Is that my understanding that we have consensus on that?
As opposed to separating them?
As opposed to separating the two programs or leaving Parentville as it is today? I'm seeing eyes looking at me, but I need to know whether or not you're...
I guess I'm just confused.
Well, and understand, I mean, I'll draft the motion, I'll get it to you guys can look at it, does this make sense, is this what we're talking about, is this what I want to do? Because again, you're going to have some time to think about it over that period of time. Yeah, not coming for vote tomorrow.
And there's going to be two motions.
One for McKinley and one for the Parentville, yes.
Can I make a comment?
Certainly, Mrs.
Please.
McDonough.
The thing that bothers me, and I understand the money part, I mean, I truly understand the money part, but for me, it's so many professionals have come to the board and asked the board to keep the program intact as it is. And even the email today that we received from Kathy, it's pretty plain that these people feel so strongly this program should be as it is and not broken up, that I don't know, in good conscience, I cannot support this. I just think it's not the right thing to do. Yes, we need to find, budget adjustments, but I just don't think that this is the right thing for us to do. I'm disappointed on the way the whole thing was set up and portrayed. These folks were given letters before, the board was even taking any action on it. There's boxes sent to the schools, and it's very disappointing for me to have these things take place. And it's, to me, it's just not the right thing to do. It's not the best interest of these children. And, in my forum group, there was a group of parents that stated that they were referred by U of M doctors to Parentville because of the program and what it does for these students. And I just think that people move to our community because of it. There's just too many factors that, for $200,000, that we are just leaving too much on the table. I know you all have a right to your own opinions on what you feel, but I just don't think it's the right thing to do. I really don't. There's just too many professionals that have come to us and asked us not to do this. And I'm not a professional educator by any means, and I'll never claim to be. But when somebody comes to me asking me not to do something because they feel so strongly that it shouldn't be done, and these are employees that are still working for the district, they're sticking their necks out as far as I'm concerned. And that to me speaks volumes. And I just don't think it's the right thing for us to do.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Then I think if we're talking about not closing Parentville to save this $200,000, I think then are we going to ask Dr. Leopold to find another $200,000? And how are we going to explain to those parents that we're closing their children's programs and not just moving their kids' programs? We're going to close some programs. And how are we, where are you going to find the money if we think that we're not going to hurt the district, or if there's not going to be some kind of fallout? What choice do you see on our plates that is not going to critically impact some of our students? Closing programs. I can't see that closing programs is less impactful on students than moving programs. And who is going to make the telephone call to the parents of those other kids when we tell them their MACAT program is closed, or their ACAT program is closed, or we're taking away the AIB program, or our kids can't be in marching band anymore? How about if we tell the kids that they can't have cheerleading anymore?
Let's do it, because education first.
Yeah.
Let's call the question.
You know what? I'm not going to debate right now. I just feel that we need a line item budget. We need to have access to it. We've got contracts out there that I'm sure we could get adjustments on.
Mr. Centers.
Well, I do want to say that, a lot of people have come to me. I know a lot of people in this crowd personally, and I respect a lot of their opinions. I know them personally. I'm friends with people that go to Parentville. This is not a decision we take lightly. And, the Jackson solution, like I said, is probably not a perfect solution, and people are going to not be happy. It is our attempt at hearing your voice and trying to do the best we can. And again, it's very tough, and we want those opportunities for kids. no one wants to be up here saying we want to close the school. Trust me, absolutely not. We have such a limited budget and we can't raise the money to do anything. We feel your pain. We understand the transitions that will be coming. We have talked to Dr. Liepa and Jen and other people, our elementary people, about the transitions that are going to come, how important they are to us as a board, that any transitions that happen are going to be handled with the utmost care. It's not perfect, but again, it's finding that balance and creating a budget that will benefit everyone in the school district and really minimize the damage of cuts we have to make.
Any other comments? President Burton.
Mrs. McDonald, I agree with you that when you said it bothers me, it bothers the heck out of me. So, and I would venture to say, although I'm very careful about not putting words in other people's mouths, I bet it bothers the heck out of every single person who's sitting at this table right now. All of us, not just one of us. It bothers all of us. If we understand the money part, we've had to understand the last $17 million while you and I sat on the board through almost every one of those decisions. If we hadn't done that, we'd be a deficit school district with an emergency financial manager right now. That's how dire this is. I do not want to close a Perrinville building. I didn't want to take kindergarten parapros out. I'm embarrassed to say to our social studies teachers that, yes, you have textbooks that are so outdated that the students laugh at them. I'm really, really bothered by the fact that we had to take learning specialists out. I hate the fact that we had to eliminate reading recovery. And the list goes on and on. And if we did not move on every decision that bothered us, get off the board or hire an emergency financial manager, that's where we are. If we want to keep our district afloat through all of this, we have to make decisions. And no matter what way we cut it, they bother us. They bother the heck out of me. I agree with you. But we are responsible for 15,000 students and their welfare. And it's been said many times, and very rightly so, doctors, social workers, educators tell parents with students with special needs, get to Livonia into the Perrinville program. And it's very important to note that we are doing this in order to keep the Perrinville program. The number one request, at least that I received in our gathering together at Perrinville a few weeks ago and via email, is find a way to keep ASD and ECP together. That is number one. Find a way. There must be a way. There must be a better way. Find it. We're finding it. They are not sending students to the Perrinville building. They're sending students to the Perrinville program. And we are finding a way to keep those programs together. I wish that I could keep it all intact. I wish I could keep the last 5 to 10 years intact. But we don't have that option because we are not given the funding from the state, and it's illegal for us to raise it in any other way. We have to make do for our 15,000 students with the allowance that we get from Lansing. And if we've been asked over and over and over, find a way to keep those two programs together, this keeps those two programs together.
Are there any other comments? No. Then we can move on to item B. Review of bid results for additional mobile devices. Mrs. Alice.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Good evening again, everyone. we are very pleased to be bringing to the Board of Education a recommendation to expand our existing mobile device pilot that we have occurring in our schools. Earlier this year, I came to the board and you graciously approved the recommendation to pilot Chromebooks at the middle school level and to pilot Chromebooks and 2 tablets at the K-4 level. Tonight we are bringing to you a recommendation to expand the pilot to include upper elementary schools, high schools, and additional devices at the middle school level. For the upper elementary school and high school mobile device pilot, we are recommending that we pilot 3 different devices, the Chromebook as well as 2 tablets. For the middle school, we are recommending that we expand the existing pilot of the Chromebook to include 2 additional tablets. The variety of mobile devices at each of the levels will allow us to make an informed decision as to which device or devices are best able to meet the curriculum and instructional needs of our teachers, as well as the learning needs and uses of our students. So moving on to the recommendation, beginning with the notebook. We are recommending 108 Samsung Chromebook 2s. This is the same mobile device being piloted currently in our elementary and middle schools. This device has an 11.6-inch high-definition screen, keyboard, touchpad, camera for photos and videos, and a built-in microphone as well as an USB port. It has up to 8 hours of battery life, 4 gigabytes of memory, and 16 gigabytes of storage capacity. We're also recommending 3 storage charging carts. Each cart will house and charge 36 notebooks. The upper elementary school selected to pilot will get 1 cart, and the high school selected to pilot will get 2 carts. We're also recommending installation of the 108 Chromebooks. The vendor will install and configure the devices, which will allow us to simulate the process that we'll use when we move to district-wide implementation for the 2016-17 school year. Should any problems or issues occur on this small scale, we'll be able to rectify them before we go to a larger scale implementation. The total for the Chromebooks, storage charging carts, and installation is $39,560.28. Next, moving on to the tablets, we're recommending 108 Samsung Galaxy tablets for education, which has a 10.1-inch screen, 3 megapixel camera, and 720p high-definition video recording capabilities. We're also recommending 3 storage charging carts. Each cart will house and store 36 tablets. Once again, we are recommending the installation and configuration of the 108 tablets for the same purpose as the Chromebooks. The vendor will install and configure the devices, which will allow us to simulate a process that we will use when we move to full implementation. Allow us to fix any problems that occur before we move on to a larger scale of implementation. The upper elementary school, middle school, and high school selected to pilot will each receive 1 cart with 36 devices on the cart. The total for the Galaxy tablets, storage charging carts, and installation is $42,618.84. Finally, moving on to the second tablet, which is our 3rd mobile device, we are recommending the iPad. The iPad comes bundled in 10 packs, so we are requesting 10 packs of the iPad Air plus 8 additional iPads, which will bring us to a total of 108 iPads. Each of them will have 32 gigabytes of memory, a 9.7-inch screen, 5 megapixel camera, and 1080p high-definition video recording capability. We're recommending, to go along with the iPads, 3 power sync carts. Each cart will house and charge the iPads. Again, we are recommending installation and configuration of the 108 iPads to allow us to, once again, monitor this on a small scale, fix any problems that could occur before we move to district-wide implementation during the 2016-17 school year. Also, just in case we need it, we're recommending a maximum of 1 full day of technical support from Apple. Once again, the schools selected to pilot will each receive 1 cart and 36 iPads with each cart. The total for the iPads, the Power Sync carts, installation, and possible technical support is $55,325.85. So the total amount needed to expand our mobile device pilot is $504.97. Since the vendor for the Chromebooks and the tablet is Troxel, who is one of the REMC vendors for these devices, no additional bids are required. And since Apple is a sole provider of iPads, once again, no additional bids are required. As you've heard me say and share with you previously, districts must purchase technology tools, including these mobile devices, as we pilot them. Unlike when we pilot textbooks and instructional resources, the publishing companies give us those items for free. This is not the case with technology resources. Districts must pay for them in order to pilot them. The funds for these purchases will come from the technology funds that are included in the 2013 bond. The purchase will not expend the full allocation of technology funds available for each of the schools that are piloting these devices. Additional funds will be available for them when we move to larger scale implementation. Teachers who are going to be piloting these devices, they will be asked at the about a year from now to complete a survey that will give us input on these devices and help us make a decision as to what device or devices to bring to the board about a year from now for full implementation. Joining me this evening is Tim Clan, our administrator of the IT department. He and I would be very happy to answer any questions or listen to any comments from the board.
Are there any questions, Mr. Centers?
Can you remind me again of how long we did a pilot earlier in the year?
We started a pilot, yes, I will be happy to.
Yeah,
we started a pilot at the middle school with the Chromebooks.
Right.
And we started the pilot because we needed to put Chromebooks in the middle school so we could free up the computer labs for M-STEP testing.
That's right.
And then we moved to piloting the 3 different devices at the elementary schools. We had 2 elementary schools that were selected to pilot. They currently are piloting the Chromebooks, Android tablets, and iPads, and they will continue with their pilot next year.
Okay, thank you. And nowhere that we've started piloting have they been there a year, so we haven't had feedback yet?
Not yet.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions? President Burton.
You said that we've got budgeted in here 1 day of tech support if needed. How's that going to be determined?
I'm going to turn to Mr. Clan and have Mr. Clan answer that question.
That was something that actually we hadn't requested, but Apple included as part of the setup and configuration of the devices. A lot of that is determined by how we have the system set up on the back end. So they put that in there in case we needed it. They also offered a smaller version, so up to that amount if we need technical support, whether it's on-site or over the phone, if we have any issues on the back end side while they're doing the configuration and setup, that they would be able to help us with that.
Okay. And then, Mrs. Ellis, the teachers, do I remember correctly that the teachers who will be piloting these and who you said are going to be on the committee to help choose them, that each one of them will have some experience in their classroom with all 3 of the choices?
Yes, one of the commitments that teachers make to participate in the pilot is that they will use each of the 3 devices in their classroom for an extended period of time with their students, okay, so that they can give us some informed feedback.
So they will truly be able to compare apples to apples?
Yes.
So to speak.
Well, tablets.
Well, okay, yeah, bad choice of words, okay.
Mobile device to mobile device.
There you go, okay, we'll call it that. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other
Although Steve
comments?
Jobs would love that.
I have some questions. Mrs. Alice, there's a pilot program being done right now in the elementary schools?
In a K-4 school?
In a K, and that will continue next year?
Yes, it will.
Will it continue with the same teachers, or will it be different teachers?
We're going to continue with the same teachers. We had some implementation issues with some of our devices with the iPads specifically, and so teachers weren't given a full opportunity to use the iPads. So we're going to continue with the same teachers and the same devices. We'll extend the length of time that they'll have with each of the devices.
Okay.
And then it will also give them ample time to try the iPads.
Thank you. Also, this $137,504.97 comes out of the technology budget?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and that's
Out
a
of the-
bucket.
Out of the 2013 bond technology portion.
Okay, and being that those are bond dollars, we can't use them for anything other than what we said we would use them for?
Correct.
Okay, so those are not flex dollars?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
Action?
Mrs. Bonnefield.
June 8th regular agenda?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, and since we have you here, we will move on to the review of bid results for document cameras.
Okay. All right. Mr. Klan is going to bring the document camera that we're recommending to the table. You'll have a chance to see it. This evening, we are very excited to bring to the board a recommendation to purchase document cameras for all of our classrooms. Document cameras are one of the classroom technology tools that are included in the 2013 bond. Prior to tonight's recommendation, we piloted multiple document cameras in our classrooms. You may remember I came to you a while ago and asked to purchase projectors, and we were piloting different types of projectors in 3 classrooms in each of the Phase 1 schools. And when we visited Coolidge, we had a chance, earlier this year, we had a chance to see the ultra-short throw projectors, and at that time, we also had an opportunity to see the document cameras that we were piloting in those same classrooms. And a little while ago, we surveyed the teachers who have been piloting each of the different document cameras, and we asked for some feedback from them. We asked them to tell us the ease of the use of the different devices, the reliability, the clarity, the multifunctional ability, the instructional uses, student engagement and interest, and integration in the curriculum. And based on the teacher feedback from the teachers who participated in the pilots, the Lumens Ladybug was the preferred choice by far. So therefore, a request for proposal was generated and made available on April 27th, 2015. The 3 bids were opened on the May 14th, 2015 due date. A post-bid interview was held with the low bidder to verify the proposal, to make sure that it was inclusive of the scope of work, and to gather information on previous related experiences. The board has a copy of the bid tabulation sheet that indicates the bids received, the names of the companies, and also the base bid. Based on the evaluation by the project team, we recommend that a contract be awarded to VSC Inc. in Novi for purchase and installation of the Lumens DC-192 Ladybug in our classrooms. The base bid is $408,455 with a 10% contingency of $40,846. Brings the total to $449,301. The total amount for this purchase is within the budget that's been allocated for the document cameras and the technology portion of the 2013 bond. And if approved, the installation of the document camera will begin this summer with the Phase 1 schools. So Cleveland, Coolidge, Cooper, Frost, and Rosedale will all have document cameras installed. And following that, we will install them in the Phase 2 schools, which are Hayes, Kennedy, Roosevelt, Riley, Emerson, and Franklin. And the rest of the installation then will follow the construction timeline and schedule. Once again, I have Tim with me, and I also have Rob Greger from Barton Mallow, who is here to answer any questions that board members may have.
Are there any questions, Mrs. Bonifield?
When you put the bid together, how did you come up with the number of ladybugs you were going to order? Did you just estimate the number of classrooms, or I know a lot of classrooms, the PTAs have bought a lot of these little guys. How did that come into play with when you were putting the bid package out?
I believe, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Some of this, for the buildings going forward, some of those were projections or estimates. For the 11 buildings, the first phase and the second phase, we actually walked every classroom.
Okay.
To determine whether there was a class actually in there, because we're not putting them in every classroom.
Sure.
Because you've got some rooms that are empty. We're part of, the projector bid that we did was pre-wiring some of those classrooms. So a classroom that may not have a class in it today, but may tomorrow, we're putting the wiring in for it, but not actually the projector and the lumens.
Sure.
So these numbers, at least in the first 11, are based off of actual walkthroughs and off our projector counts. And then in the second or third and fourth
They are a
phases.
projected number. We also have unit pricing on the document cameras, so that if we need to
Right.
purchase additional cameras.
But the number of existing document cameras in the buildings has already been taken into consideration now?
They are being replaced, because the new projectors and the new wiring that's going in is all digital. And so a lot of those won't connect to those new systems any longer. So they've got to have the HDMI pass through on them to project up to those screens.
Okay.
So in many cases, some of those will be used in classrooms or in areas that weren't getting a new system. And you're right, some of them have a lot in the buildings and some don't have as many, so they may actually, it's kind of going to be up to the building. We're going to collect them as we go through and put them in, and then the building can look at how many they have and decide what they want to do with the devices they have left.
Okay, all right, but I'm sure they'll find somewhere to utilize
The devices will stay within the school.
Okay.
So these are not compatible with the projection systems that are being installed in the new renovation?
These are.
No, I mean, the ones
Right.
that they already have, there's a compatibility issue.
Right, the wiring that we're putting in is all digital, it's all the HDMI wiring. You could buy adapters and things like that to try to make them, but then you're gonna spend another, anywhere from $40 to $100 potentially for an adapter for each room, to try to make the old stuff work. And then trying to determine how old is too old, and, if somebody didn't get one today and next year that one dies, how do we replace it? So same thing was with the projectors. We had a lot of projectors existing in some of the classrooms, but most of them weren't ceiling mounted, they were just on a cart. This is much cleaner, the way they're running the wiring, the way we're setting them up in each of the classrooms to make everything consistent. And that's also part of it, trying to make a consistent teaching experience throughout all the classrooms.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Johnson?
How many are we getting for $108,000?
891.
Okay, so we're getting a lot.
Yes.
What, is this wireless or is it wired?
No, it is wired. It is, yes, it is wired.
We just unhooked the wires to bring it here.
Wasn't sure. Ms. Alice, you said that this was the overwhelming choice.
Yes.
What was it about this one that everybody liked? What made it the overwhelming choice?
Predominantly the ease of use and the ease between going from the lumen to the document camera to the computer and back to the document camera. With the push of a button.
Okay.
Push a button, and what you have on your computer screen is now showing on through the projector. You push a button, and what you have under your document camera is now being shown through your projector.
So the entire operation is through the unit itself and not through the computer, or through the projector?
It's a combination of the two.
Okay.
There is software that installs on the computer as well, which offers additional functionality. One of the nice features of this is that it can be connected to the computer, or it is connected. The computer goes from the computer through the document camera and then to the projector. So in the simplest state, you can have the computer on, it's showing on the screen. You turn on the document camera, its image comes up on the screen, and they can use it just like that, and they can switch back and forth between the two. There's additional software that's going to be installed on the computers, which opens up a lot more functionality to this device to be able to record the teacher's lecture, to record what's being shown on the screen so that they can post it online for the kids. There's a lot of different functionality that's offered by that software, but that isn't required to use the device.
Is the software, Tim, accessed only through the computer, or can you access it through the device?
It's software that's loaded on the computer that allows you make the adjustments. You can make the adjustments from the computer or from the device.
Here. Okay.
Right, and it's using the processing power in the computer to do what what you're asking it to do.
All right. Gotcha.
Other than just showing an image.
I would also say that the clarity of the picture was one of the things that was considered, and the durability of the unit itself.
Okay.
It was one of the biggest factors, like Sheila was saying, is the ease of use. So what some of the other ones, it was confusing. There were, they would have to hit buttons. They'd be calling us. Things wouldn't connect properly. They'd have to unplug it, plug it back in, wait for it to reboot, to come up. A lot of things that teachers just can't afford to do when they're in front of a classroom of.
It was really a loss of time.
Yeah, 26 kids, and they don't have 5 minutes to try to figure out why isn't this showing up on the screen. They need to be able to turn it on and have it work, and that's one of the things we heard from most of them.
The reliability and the ease of the use of it.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Are there any, President Burton?
Yes, as a follow-up to Mrs. Bonnefield, your question regarding existing document cameras. I remember many times over the last year or two that we've had PTAs give gifts to the district of document cameras, and each and every time we made sure that they're aware that we have bond money that is going to be coming within the next few years, and each and every time they said we recognize that. We will use them as duplicates and for other purposes in our buildings, for other uses, but we want to have this technology in our classrooms today now. So I want to make sure folks know that that's not an oversight on the part of either the PTAs or the districts that are supplying these, but it was a matter of a conscious decision to not wait and to get those in the classrooms.
And some of them have probably been in the classrooms for 5 to 7 years, or so
There's
some of them may.
There's been quite some time.
And there's several buildings that are going to be another year or two before they actually get the new equipment as well. So.
That's true. Any other comments or questions? Mrs. Bonnefield?
June 8th, regular agenda?
Yes,
Yes, regular agenda.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is exciting.
And it's cute, too. Okay. And now we can move on to the review of bid results for copy paper with Mrs. Abby.
The most exciting topic.
Thank you, good evening again. Our annual trip through paper. For copy paper, as you know, each year we do buy in bulk copy paper and bring that in for schools that then use it throughout the year. Tonight we're bringing our recommendation to purchase white 8.5 by 11, white 11 by 17, and then 8.5 by 11 colored copy paper. What you have in front of you is a recommendation. I did also provide in your packet a little summary between 14-15 and 15-16, so you could kind of get a look at the prices. As you can see, the white 8.5 by 11 is by far our largest purchase at about 4,400 cartons, and about 200 cartons for a little over 200 for the other. And we actually saw a slight drop in price on the 8.5 by 11 white, so that's good news. Slight increase on the colored and the larger paper, but not very much money considering that we order so few cartons of those. So overall, while we're ordering a little bit more in quantity, we are seeing a little bit lower price on a per unit basis. And these costs are from the REMC bid, and we would recommend that we go ahead and approve this purchase so we can get that in for the next school year. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Mrs. Abby, I see that we're ordering quite a few more boxes of white copy paper. Did we have a surplus last year and we're running really low, or
we did have a surplus
using
last year. You know, it's just going to kind of ebb and flow in what's in the warehouse.
So we're not necessarily using an extra almost 1,000 boxes of paper this year. It just happens to be that we're restocking.
And you'll recall the way the copy paper works with our budgets are that we stock this in the warehouse and that these are items that people use their budget code for. So if a school is ordering paper, they're using their teaching supply or school supply budget for that. So if they're using a little bit more paper, it's not necessarily influencing our teaching supply budget because their budget hasn't changed. They just might be doing something more with copy paper that last year they did in some other function,
And so each individual building, if, let's say they've got $100 budget and they
Right.
spend $60 on paper this year, they only have $40 to spend on
Exactly.
something else. If they decide they want to spend $40 on paper, then they've got $60
You
to
got it.
spend on something else. Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
So much for our paperless society, unfortunately.
They kept talking about that. It's not here yet. Can we put this on the agenda then, Mrs. Bonifield?
Yes, ma'am. On June 8th, are we going with the
Pretty,
regular?
pretty basic if you want to do consent.
Yeah, we can put it on the consent agenda.
Consent, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Abby.
Thank you.
While I have you here,
Yep, we're gonna hang out, and I'm gonna, I think, defer to Dr. Leopold to get us started on the,
potential
Soccer
cooperative
leagues.
agreement for the Cooper Recreation Site.
Yes, as you know, we completed renovation through the sinking fund at the Cooper site a few years ago, and have let the soccer fields there actually grow and make sure that they're in really good shape before we put them into use. And we're at a position now where we can put them into use, which we're actually very excited about. And so as a revenue-generating idea for the school district, and this has been our plan all along, for the period of time that the facility can be used outside of school hours, we'd like to go ahead and hire a company to come in and manage the use of the soccer fields. And so we're recommending that we enter a cooperative agreement with Total Soccer. And Total Soccer is a very well-known and well-respected soccer organization in the metropolitan Detroit area. They run Total Soccer in Wixom. They run a Total Soccer facility right up on Farmington Road in Farmington. They actually run the Eastern Michigan facility at Eastern Michigan University. They also run an outside set of fields in, I believe, South Lyon. And so they've got a lot of experience at this, and we would like to work with them to utilize the facility or the grounds moving forward. The terms of the lease that we're working out would be, it would begin on July 1st. And although the fields actually won't be used until the fall, as you know, that's prime soccer times are both the fall and the spring, not really in the summer. The agreement would be for 5 years, and there are 3 different options for an additional 5-year option within the lease. What we're suggesting is that the lease price be $35,000 a year, and it would increase with a cost of living increase every year by 2%. The first year, we are suggesting that we give them a reduction in the rate because they really need to get this up and running and going for the first time, and so we don't want them to be in a position where they're just scheduling the fields for the very first time this fall and end up short. And so what we'd like to do is we will just have an agreement with them that we will keep 50% of whatever revenue that they generate in that first year, which I would anticipate being probably about half of what we would get in a normal year. There is an out clause for us that if we get some other type of offer or use for any or a portion of the facility, we'd be able to come back to them. There'd be a buyout termination or agreement, a clause in there to make sure that their whatever investment they've got in the property, they would have some kind of payment for that. That's certainly understandable, yet at the same point in time, we're protected that if someone wants to come in and put a nice indoor facility out there, that we could use a portion of the property for that as an example. We have continued use of the property again during the school time for any of our schools, including Cooper across the street, which has actually used the parking on different occasions already. And you know, we could also have our high schools use it and so on before they would start their normal start times. There's clear identification in the agreement of who's responsible for what, and so, for example, we're responsible for the mowing of the property, the cleaning of the air filters there to make sure that we're meeting all the due care requirements under the property, because as you know, it's a former landfill that it was built on. And so we've got certain due care responsibilities as part of receiving the MDNR grant several years ago from the state of Michigan. And so much easier for us to take care of that. They'll take care of the ongoing day-to-day type of thing, like lining the fields and getting the goalposts and putting them on and moving them, et cetera. Again, this is just another revenue enhancement idea that we're bringing forward. We are excited to generate a little bit of revenue off the property, but even more excited to put this particular property back in use. It's been 24 years. And it feels like most of the time I've been working on it to try to get it back to some positive use. So we're looking forward to taking the fences down and having a positive reuse of that facility, not just for soccer after school, but for our own use during school time with our kids. And so we have to get that work up. If we're ready for June 8th, we'll bring it. If not, I'll just let you know, and we'll bring it at the later June board meeting for your approval, because I don't have a copy of that agreement in front, even though I've provided for you the basic terms.
Are there any questions? Mrs. McDonald?
Dr. Leopudge, how much do you think the maintenance and repair costs will be on an annual basis?
Very small. We anticipated that, in fact, bumped up the annual fee with them when we decided to take on that responsibility. We bumped up the overall revenue per year by about $5,000 to make sure that any costs that we would have for our staff to go and do that work would be covered.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Shall we put this on the June 8th agenda?
Yeah, with a question mark, if I don't,
With a question
if I can't get the lease to you in a decent amount of time ahead of time, so you can take a peek at that, then we'll push it off to the later meeting in June. But I did want to make sure to get that on for you to take a look at in committee, because we'd like to have that start on July 1st.
Okay, and thank you. We will keep Ms. Abby in the hot seat and move on to number F, the 2014-15 final budget amendments. Ms. Abby? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am passing around some summary information for you. I'll wait for it to get around, but as we do every time this time of year, we bring a final budget amendment to the Board of Education. This is a culmination of us sitting down and going through every line item on the budget and looking at our projections, looking at past history, looking at what we think people have spent, for example, out of their supply budgets, and making adjustments based on that. It really doesn't change necessarily what we need for the following years. In other words, these are some one-time revenues or one-time expenditures. So if I haven't spent every bit of my supply budget at this time of the year, I'm going to reduce that line item a little bit. So we have a bet. What we're really looking at is trying to get a really good picture of where we're going to end up the year. So as you are making final decisions moving forward with next year's numbers, you have a better idea of where we think we'll end up with next year. Of course, these are still estimates and still projections. We have to wait till we close our books to have everything finalized. But the kind of things that we'll be looking at right now, for example, our utilities, how much diesel fuel we've used, that kind of thing. So that's from a big picture. So let me just kind of go over the numbers that you have in front of you. As I typically do, I bring this document to you that shows you from the proposed budget through this final amendment all the changes that we've had throughout the year. Earlier in the spring, if you look under column 3, that would have been the last amendment that we brought to the Board of Education. You'll recall we were looking at about a $1 million ending fund balance for the school year. If you look at column F, this is the final budget estimate that we're bringing to the Board of Education. We have an increase of revenues of just under $200,000, a decrease in expenditures of a little over $500,000. Those are both positive. So we're looking at an overall change in our budget of $757,000, getting our fund balance to the end of the year at $1.7 million. So that's a very positive and good change. Let me go over just a little bit some of those big pictures again. There aren't a lot of, there's a lot of little line items that we change as we go along, but this is the accumulation of all of it. I'll go over the major changes for you. When we look at the revenue, you have down at the bottom section of this, you'll see that the overall revenue for local property taxes changed by a little over $600,000. You might recall that whenever property taxes go up or down during the school year, that amount is offset by the state aid. So you'll recall that that's one pie. We get the foundation allowance times the number of children we have, and then the state deducts what we collect locally on our non-homestead property taxes, those 18 mills. So if what we're going to collect changes, then what the state is going to pay us changes. So this just happens usually once or twice a year. We see that adjustment from the state. So that amount, if you look down a little bit further, is going to be offset by the same amount increase in revenue generally from the state aid. So a decrease in property taxes, an increase in state aid. There were a few other minor changes in state aid. We saw about a $100,000 increase in what we anticipate in local taxes, what we expect to get in Medicaid funds. We also saw a slight change in state aid, about $60,000 in special ed funding we expect to see increase. So that's what you see, that total overall increase of $192,000 in revenues. On expenditures, this is pretty typical for a final budget amendment. What you're looking at, these are very small adjustments considering, the percentages, changes on the budget. Salaries, again, that's across hundreds and hundreds of line items. One of the major line item changes was we did adjust our severance pay for this budget. You'll recall because the early retirement incentive was approved, we have about 40 employees leaving above and beyond what we normally would have budgeted for. So we did make those adjustments. Those costs will be attributed to this fiscal year, whereas the actual ERI, the actual incentive, will be paid out over the next 3 fiscal years. So that was an adjustment to this budget. Benefits, you'll see that reduction of about $170,000. Really, that's getting our retirement costs in line mostly. That's that 147C, 147D monies that we've kind of been trying to pin down at every budget amendment to get it right on. So we should be right on with those numbers now that we have all of our salary adjustments made. And then the other major changes, if you look under purchase services, there's a little bit of an increase for some utility costs. And then under supplies, that reduction of $211,000, the bulk of that, about $120,000, is actually a decrease in our anticipated use of diesel fuel, which is good news. We all know the gas prices have been down, or at least until the last couple of weeks. So that was good news for us this year, save a little bit of money. So overall, again, total expenditure reduction of $565,000, bringing the deficit to the year to just a little over $2 million, and the ending fund balance at $1.7 million. So good news, but as Dr. Leopa said, that just gets us a little bit of a head start as we look at that projections for next year. So, and again, these are one-time sorts of things. I wouldn't change my diesel budget for next year necessarily. I might adjust it a little bit if you think gas prices might be good through the fall. But again, those are the kind of things where you really have to take a longer-term trend to look at as we move forward. I'll answer your questions. I just also provided in your packet the same information in that level of detail by function so that you can see those line items in a different way. And then, of course, in your packet this week, we'll get together the budget book, so you'll have all of the resolutions to go through for all of the funds. The other funds of the district, we don't anticipate any significant changes. There'll be little minor changes, minor adjustments, but as far as our other funds, there aren't any significant changes, so that should be straightforward. In your packet this week, and then you still have a few days after that, obviously before the 8th, for me to answer any questions that you might have that we didn't get answered tonight. So with that, very fast explanation.
Dr. Leopa.
If I could just add a couple of comments. As Lisa mentioned, we're pleased that the numbers are trending in an upward position. I would just highlight that, as first of all, she mentioned that the change in revenues and expenditures is well less than 1% in both areas, so they're rather minor overall. The second thing that we cannot lose track of as we're thinking about next year and the year after is we're walking into next year spending $2 million more than we had coming in. Now, that was the game plan because we wanted to save programs, and so that was the game plan going into this year, but I don't want to lose track of the fact that even with this amendment being better than it was just a few months ago, we're still spending $2 million more than we have coming in. and that's part and parcel of our challenge. So that's what we're walking in the door with. Then add in declining enrollment, hardly any increase from the state, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the challenges that we're facing. That's why we did the early retirement incentive, to try to reduce our salary costs, and we're doing our best just to try to keep up. But I just want to highlight those things. They're very important as we continue to keep focus on the big picture moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Centers?
Yeah, and I think you touched on that well. We were anticipating perhaps having less than 1% of fund balance, and we finished a little bit over 1%. We really should be at, if things were ideal operating conditions, 5 to 10%.
That's correct. Not only that, if you remember, the House just passed a bill that's called early warning legislation to supposedly tell school districts, you guys have something to watch very closely here. They want an 8% fund balance. And like you said, we're a little over 1%.
Yeah. So that being said, I know Lisa and Randy, you both did some really creative things as far as, not filling positions right away or shifting resources. And
yes,
so
I've been talking about that all year, so thank you for bringing that up.
So this could have been this number where we were, but really because of a lot of ingenuity and a lot of hard work.
Yeah, and to the staff's credit too, I want to recognize every staff member across the school district, because we asked them, unless it's an emergency purchase, we want you to finish the year up and not spend anything. Now, that's a tough thing to do, because we're, as I said, we've got work to do and things happen, but that's been the message to every single staff person, and they've helped us out, obviously, going into the end of the school year. So thank you for recognizing that.
Any other questions or comments? Mrs. McDonald?
Thank you. If anyone wouldn't object, I wondered if Ms. Abby could send each of us by email a copy of the chart of accounts. I don't know if anyone else is interested in looking at it or going through it, because it's quite extensive, but I think it would help me understand where we're at. And it's just a breakdown of each line item in the budget.
Mrs. Burton?
Ms. Abby, is that something that is easily accessible? Because right now I know our staff is stretched to the limits.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. I can send it to everyone.
And the purpose, Mrs. McDonald, again, of having that is
Well, what it'll do, it'll break down per building, per line item.
I understand.
No,
but
just so I can review it, so I can be as educated and knowledgeable over this whole budget process as possible.
It would be an interesting thing to see. And I, just as a personal note, I appreciate that you brought it to the board, because that's what we're supposed to be doing now.
I agree. Just one question. How large of a document are we talking?
It's thousands and thousands of line items. I'm suggesting I send it electronically.
Yeah, good idea.
And it's about this thick, yeah. Having said that, remember, every single budget, you also receive a pretty detailed line item in the back of the budget, so that might be a nice sort of summary thing to look at if you're looking at the specific detail.
That's what I was talking about, that one that, looks like
Yeah,
this.
it does a
that
pretty darn good job by
breaks
function,
it out by
identifying
function, so it'll be elementary instruction, and then it talks about
what's in those line
salaries,
items.
benefits, purchase services, supplies,
Substitute
equipment.
teachers, et cetera.
So
it's a
one we
nice.
already have.
Yeah, this one you would have had in your last budget book, and you'll get it this week for the final amendment.
Yeah.
So you have it through the third amendment.
You recall, you all had talked about this and agreed that that's what you wanted about a year and a half ago.
Right.
Yep. So that'll be in there too, and it's a nice summary, quite a bit of detail, but a little easier to read than 1,000
The other,
line items.
if we can show off our budget book a second, then.
Sure.
The other, this typically ends up on page 10, but it could be page 9, it could be on page 11, depending on the book. But another way to look at the budget is this page, because it just breaks it out a little bit differently. So for example, it's administrators, teachers, some of the different ways in which we pay our employees. Those breakouts, there's, for example, you see the total cost for healthcare, the total cost for the retirement, total cost for FICA. Whereas on some of those others, it's broken up, by that function or by that department or by that area. So it's just another way to look at those same line items if you want to know, what we spend on utilities or just another way to look at that. So as you think about the budget. sometimes the detail is not as easy to get into, to say, well, and then, bring it back, so back and forth between the detail and the big picture.
So since we have that quarterly, if any of us wanted to compare one quarter to the next, 1 year back and forth, we could just pull out our budget books and flip over to the back and we've got it. So I know what shelf mine's on.
Any other questions or comments? Do we add this to the agenda for approval?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Abby.
Thank you. I'll just hang out and listen to volleyball leagues.
You're more than welcome to. And that's our final item for the financial committee.
We have one more.
No, directing to the final item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Of the potential volleyball leagues.
Yes, what I did want to get on your agenda today is a cooperative agreement that the city would like us to consider. And I'll pass it out again. I sent you a copy of this electronically, but it's a picture of our existing property that is owned where the old Wilson school used to be, which is actually our food service center for many, many years. We took the facility down several years ago. It's on the corner of West Chicago and Harrison. And so you can see the picture of that particular property. On the north end of the property, what you see is the Clemens Circle swimming pool. And what the city has asked us to partner with them on is to allow them to use a small portion of the property up in the northeast section in the far corner in order to have a sand volleyball court there. That's what they'd like to put there. The city would pay for all the costs, they would maintain it, they would monitor it, we'd have all the appropriate liability disclaimers, et cetera. But they would like to see if we would be willing to work with them on that, to put that in. And so what they'd like to do is lease the property for 5 years with potential of a 5-year extension. And again, the terms would include clearly who's liable for anything happening on that property, any maintenance, et cetera. And that we do have an opt-out, then if something came up, we had an opportunity to utilize the property for something else, sell the property, whatever the board may wish to do. And they'd like to do it as a cooperative agreement. They'll put all the money into it, they'll maintain it, and they're asking us to provide the property at no cost. Again, you're looking at 90 feet by 120 feet in the upper northeast corner of the property. So it's a nice, in my opinion anyways, it's a nice cooperative agreement with the city, working together to provide something nice for the community up there. We don't have any use for that particular, and haven't for some time, that particular corner of the property up there. And so unless there's any concerns, what I'd like to do is have our legal counsel then look at their proposed lease agreement, and once we work out the details, bring that forward. So, but I won't bring that forward if this is something that you're not interested in being in partnership with the city.
Mrs. Bonifield.
I like it. I think it's great relationships with the city. My only question would be, when they're done with it, is there going to be a clause in the lease for them to rehab that and take out the sand?
Good question.
And put that back to its original condition?
Good question. I'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Any other questions or comments? I have one. Is there, do we have a need to talk to the people who live across the street?
There's a pool club right next to it with a big parking lot. I mean, I really wouldn't feel that would be necessary. I mean, the schools, the properties, have been used for years for soccer, fields and et cetera. So people come and, through our use practice, have rented the property for different purposes over a lot of years. If you feel that's something we want to do, we'd be happy to do that, or better yet, make the city do that. They're getting the deal on this, so.
Well, does that require a change in ordinance with the city?
No, for the property use? No.
Okay.
And where would they park?
They'd park in the parking lot to the north there.
Okay.
Which will be vacant this year because they're not using the pool.
That's right.
Oh.
Any other questions or comments?
What's your clause again, Tammy? I forgot already. I read it down like
At the end of the, when they're done, or, you know, and I don't know how the lawyers will feel if we tell them that we're gonna sell the property and that they're done, but when they're done with it, at least, there should be some rehab
Yes.
and put it back, 'cause I have to imagine removing all that sand and stuff is,
That's a good one.
it's
Yeah.
not cheap, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
it depends on if we
Yeah,
sell it.
we don't want to incur that
But it's
cost
stuck with
if we
that.
find another use for it.
Or if they decide not to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, there you
my
go. Good-
biggest
another
concern.
good point.
It's one thing if we kick them out, but it's another thing if they're like, we're done.
Very good.
Okay, and shall we add that to the agenda for next?
My guess is it probably won't be ready by the 8th.
Not ready?
This one, the other one might be, this one probably won't be, but again, since I'm not sure how the committee meetings will fall the rest of the month.
Okay.
If for some reason I do have it ready, then we'll get it to you, we'll put it on the 8th, so put that one in the question mark pile, just like the other one, and I'll let you know.
And then, Dr. Lee, if it's not ready by the 8th, we can put it on the next
Regular
voting meeting when
elect-
it is ready.
Correct.
With notification to the packets.
Correct.
That we can put it in.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, Madam President, that concludes the Finance Committee part of the agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda for our Committee of the Whole meeting at this time. So we are adjourned from that meeting. We are now opening our special meeting of May 26th, 2015. May I have a roll, Mrs. Bonfield, please?
Mr. Centers. Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mrs. Laura.
Here.
Mrs. McDonald.
Here.
Mrs. Bonnefield is here. President